Hey guys, tonight we're stepping inside a world you've probably never imagined yourself in, and if you had, well, you probably wouldn't survive it. Welcome to the cloistered, powdered, whispered lullaby world of a concubine in feudal Japan. Not the fantasy geisha dreamscape from pop culture, but the real, brutal, subtly dangerous life of a woman whose beauty is her currency, her prison, and sometimes her only weapon. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun, but not of your own will. The palace never really sleeps, it just exhales more quietly at night. Somewhere beyond the sliding paper screens, you hear the click of getter sandals, the hiss of water being drawn, and a low murmur of distant women, always women. No one shouts here, not unless they have the power to. You are not one of them. Not yet. The air is cold against your skin, and your futon has long lost its warmth by the time you rise. The servant girl assigned to you, a skinny thing with eyes that flit like nervous birds, has already folded your bedding with military precision. She bows so low her forehead nearly touches the tatami. She won't speak unless spoken to. Her silence is both obedience and insurance. In this world, words are dangerous. You shuffle across the room, your feet padded in thin white socks that offer no warmth against the bamboo fustu floor. Your sleeves trail behind you like ghosts. This early, your hair still smells of the previous night. Burnt camellia oil and a trace of incense from your personal altar. There's a moment, just one, where you catch a glimpse of yourself in the polished bronze mirror. Pale, bare, unreadable. You look like a statue from a forgotten shrine. A sliding door opens silently. Someone oiled the tracks overnight, and you're ushered out. The hallway beyond is dim and grey, painted with pre-dawn fog. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale floor sings as someone walks across it. A security measure from an older age, meant to warn of intruders. Now it just squeaks under important feet. Yours don't make it sing, not yet. Bathing comes next. You're led to a private chamber, private only in name, because there are always eyes. The bathhouse is quiet this early, filled with a rising steam and the sweet, subtle scent of hinoki wood. You disrobe behind a folding screen, your body becoming nothing more than a silhouette. Modesty isn't exactly optional, but it's performative. Everyone here already knows what everyone else looks like beneath their robes. Flesh is currency, and every concubine is in circulation. You step into the steaming water, shoulders tight from another night of uncertain sleep. The heat bites at first, then lulls. You are scrubbed gently by attendants, their hands efficient and expressionless. They've seen everything. You imagine they've heard more than they should. You wonder if any of them once stood where you do now, stripped of status and soaking in someone else's future. The bath isn't just for cleanliness. It's ritual, it's preamble. The world you live in runs on ceremony, on repetition, on the illusion of order. While you soak, the talk around you is soft, coded. Another concubine whispers that one of the favoured girls fainted yesterday. Pregnant, maybe. Another mentions a silk kimono being taken in, just slightly. Weight loss from grief, perhaps. Nothing is said directly, and yet everything is understood. Somewhere deeper in the palace, a monk strikes a temple bell. One slow chime, then two. Morning is officially here. You're towelled off by the same silent hands, dressed in a pale underrobe, and led back toward your quarters. Everything happens in practice steps, each action born of hundreds of years of tradition. You're not improvising, you're inhabiting a role. Before you even reach your room, another girl crosses your path. She's older, more heavily painted, her obi tied in a knot that signals seniority. She nods at you, not warmth, not warning, just acknowledgement. You're seen, you're remembered. That can be a blessing or a curse. You return to your chamber to prepare for the day proper. Hair first, coiled into a style that takes 20 pins and 2 helpers to secure. It aches a little at the scalp, but it has to hold for hours. Then comes the makeup. Thick white rice paste base brushed carefully onto your face and neck. Red at the lips, black around the eyes. You've learned to hold perfectly still as the brushes dance across your skin. You become porcelain. You become someone else. The final touch is a dab of plum-scented oil behind each ear. Subtle, suggestive, It's not for you. Nothing here is. Every part of your morning is about becoming visible to the right people and invisible to the wrong ones. And here's the historical kicker. While you sit and let your face dry into its carefully constructed mask, you remember that this palace, this life, was modelled after Heian period aesthetics, even centuries later. The court preserved its poetry and lacquered perfection long past the time it made practical sense. The men ruled by sword, the women ruled by gaze and silence. You know which one you wield. You glance toward the window, a rectangle of soft white light framed in wood. It's going to be another long, brilliant, beautiful day. Oh, and here's something strange. Some scholars argue whether women in your position had more real power than the noble wives themselves. Others say you were little more than living art pieces, as disposable as they were adored. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. Like everything in your world, it's nuanced, whispered, and unresolved. Steam still clings to your skin as you leave your chamber again, the bath's warmth already fading from your bones. Now the day begins in earnest, with the slow unravelling of rituals that disguise themselves as routine. Your footsteps are quiet, practiced, and even though no one explicitly taught you how to walk like this, you learned, because if you didn't, someone would have noticed. And in a place like this, being noticed too much or too little can be equally dangerous. You're escorted by your attendant to the women's bathing house, not for a second soak, but to complete the second half of the ritual, scenting and skin treatments. The room is tiled in smooth dark stone and smells of jasmine, pine, and yuzu peel. You sit on a woven stool nude again, even though you were just dressed a half hour ago. An older servant, a woman whose eyes seem permanently narrowed, not in judgment but in exhaustion, kneels behind you and begins brushing a warm, sticky resin across your arms and back. It smells faintly of beeswax and sugar. You know this is part of the layering. The final version of yourself is built in stages. You don't talk. The other girls around you don't either. Speech, like touch, is rationed here. One careless comment, one misplaced gesture, and your name will find its way into someone else's fan-folded conversation later. You've learnt to keep your face composed even when the resin is stripped off with a sudden snap, pain like fire across your shoulder blades. Your eyes don't flinch. Good. After that come the steam towels, followed by more delicate scents. Orchid oil, tiny drops of amber essence, crushed sakura petals massaged into the wrists and ankles. This isn't for pleasure. This is a weapon. You are being sharpened. You are being prepared to be perceived. The robes they offer you next are different. This set is chosen by the head matron, based on the day's rank list and your assigned proximity to the Lord's path. Today's fabric is a deep green, embroidered with subtle cranes and reeds along the hem. You trace them with your finger briefly before slipping it on. The kimono is heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. Every layer has a message. The green speaks of poise, the cranes hint at modest longevity, and if you were chosen to wear this particular piece, someone wants you to be read in that tone. Your hair is retouched, your lips reapplied, you are ready, but that's only the beginning. Back in the women's quarters, the real game starts. It's still early, and the hall smells of cedar and morning rice. You walk into the long corridor flanked by paper doors, and heads turn, some subtly, some not. You catch a flicker of jealousy in one girl's eye. She's still wearing her overnight robe, which means she wasn't called last night. You were. She knows, everyone knows. No one says anything. You seat yourself in the shared parlour, where lacquered tables are already set with delicate porcelain bowls. You're offered warm barley tea, which you sip carefully, grateful for the brief warmth in your throat. On your left, a girl barely 17 laughs too loudly at nothing. She's new. She doesn't know yet how silence can be louder than speech. Across from you, the eldest of the group, a once favourite now relegated to the shadows, dabs at her nose with a gold-stitched sleeve. Her eyes are dry. It's all performance. The head matron enters, silent as a cat, and all conversations die mid-sentence. She claps her hands once, and the morning assignments are read. Who will attend language practice? Who will rehearse court music? Who will serve during today's poetry exchange? Your name is called last, with a title that makes your skin tighten. Prepared. No other details. That word could mean a dozen things. A midday visit, a position shift, a test. You feel a dozen other eyes on you, weighing your expression. You keep it neutral. Here's the strange part. In theory, you're not a prisoner. You weren't chained, weren't dragged here screaming, but you also weren't given much choice. Some girls were offered to the Lord by their families for a political favour. Others were chosen by talent scouts from nearby provinces. A few, very few, came willingly. They all end up in the same place, waking up like this, nodding like this, pretending not to be terrified like this. The next hour is yours, technically free time. You return to your corner of the women's compound and try to feel human for a moment. Your hands itch to write, but anything written might be read. So instead, you sit at your tiny lacquered table and run your fingers through the sand in your miniature garden tray. Rake it left, rake it right, reset the waves. There's a stillness in that act that feels like prayer. Somewhere outside your screen you hear the chime of bells from the outer shrine. A priest is passing through. You wonder if he sees any of you as real, or maybe you've become invisible in your perfection. One of the younger girls slips into your room uninvited. She smiles too broadly, a chipped tooth just barely visible beneath the crimson paint. "You wore the green today," she says, like it's an accusation. You raise one brow and pretend not to understand. "Oh," she adds, "and Lady Arisugawa says your obi was tied too high." Now that's a threat disguised as a favour. You thank her softly. She leaves with her head still turned, watching you. You feel the warning rise under your skin like heat. Historically speaking, the level of etiquette control in the women's quarters was excruciating. There were real punishments, days into Hadance, reduced meals, reassignment to lesser houses for small infractions. Even something like misaligning your sandals outside the bathhouse could become a mark against you. Your entire day, your worth, your safety could pivot on the angle of a bow. Oddly, there's an old scroll that survives from a lesser-known palace school listing common offences and more among court women. One bizarre one: sighing too loudly. Apparently sorrow was permitted, but not if it became inconvenient for others. You look again at your hands, the faint pink lines left behind by the bath's resin scrub, and realise that everything on your body has been shaped, smoothed, scented, and silenced. But the mind? That's still yours. For now. The mirror's back. You sit before it now, watching your reflection, while a servant fixes the last coil of your hair. Every strand has a place. The comb glides, pauses, glides again. You don't wince, not even when she pulls too hard. Behind you, a second attendant smooths the line of your collar, so that just the right amount of neck is exposed. An erotic gesture encoded in social ritual. Neck and wrists, not cleavage. This is not a brothel, this is the inner court where desire wears silk gloves and whispers behind fans. The face staring back at you is familiar and not. Your eyes, your lips, but arranged like a painting that's been retouched by a dozen unseen artists. You blink slowly, wondering if the girl in the glass feels like you, if she dreams like you, or if she's simply been trained not to. You rise with the others. You walk in a slow procession through the connecting corridors of the women's quarters, past carved panels and the ever-present scent of sandalwood. It's time for the morning art session. Today, music. Well, you know the drill. You've sat in this exact spot, second row, third mat from the left, for weeks now, maybe months. The koto, a 13-stringed instrument the length of a child's coffin, rests on your knees. Your fingers hover just above the strings, adorned with ivory picks. The instructor clears her throat. No one speaks. She nods once. You begin. The sound of the koto is delicate, plucked, echoing like falling water in a cavern. Your hands move with precision, not joy, not even much feeling, just control. The kind of control that lets you exist in this world, where everything from a melody to a meal is layered in unspoken rules. You were told early on that learning music wasn't optional. It cultivates grace, and the matron said, and pacifies the heart. But you know better. It's another way to measure value. You watch one of the younger girls fumble a note. It's small, barely noticeable, but the instructor hears. Her eye twitches, just a little. The girl flushes crimson and bows her head. The rest of you keep playing, your eyes forward, your mouths closed. Here's the real truth. Historically, many concubines were selected for their musical skill. A woman's ability to play, sing, or compose poems was seen as a mark of refinement and worth. During the Heian period especially, a perfectly timed verse could shift your fortunes more than a kiss ever could. The practice continued well into the Edo period. The emperor's court demanded harmony, not just in sound, but in the layered balance of art, appearance, and emotion. The session drifts from the koto to vocal training. You're expected to sing from memory, a short piece about swallows returning in spring. The tune is old, the lyrics older. You sing quietly, controlled, aware of the weight behind each note. It's not about beauty, it's about restraint. Sing too well and you'll be seen as showy. Sing too softly and you risk seeming unsure. At the session's end, the instructor claps once. The sound cracks through the quiet like a whip. You bow, place your instrument back in its velvet-lined case and rise. Your knees ache from sitting too long, but you don't show it. You move like flowing water. On your way back to your quarters, you pass one of the other concubines being escorted the opposite direction. She's wearing red, bright, lacquered and shade, unmistakable. Her eyes avoid yours. She's either being summoned or punished. In this place, sometimes they look the same. You return to your chamber only briefly. A servant tells you to prepare for a tea demonstration. Not to drink, to observe. And just like that, your schedule reshapes. You change robes again, this time a soft yellow with faint maple leaves stitched along the hem. Autumn colours, even though it's still spring. You don't ask why, you just obey. The tea room is smaller than you expected. Intimate, silent. The air is warm and filled with the scent of roasted matcha. The demonstrator, an older woman with hands like bird claws, moves slowly and precisely. Every action has weight. She folds the cloth, she turns the bowl, she breathes. You watch, you learn. Every movement is a lesson in discipline. The way she pours water with her left hand while folding the napkin with her right. It's a dance. The tea itself is thick, almost bitter. You sip without reacting. This isn't about taste. It's about showing that you understand grace. Somewhere in the back of the room you sense someone watching. Maybe a servant. Maybe someone more important. You don't turn around. You don't let your gaze waver. In this moment, being present is your only power. A curious side note. There's an obscure historical debate over whether concubines were expected to master the tea ceremony or merely perform a simplified version for show. Some scholars say the full ritual was reserved for wives and higher status women. Others argue that concubines learned it to reinforce their role as cultured companions, part servant, part sculptor, part diplomat. You've learned not to care which version is true. In the palace, all versions are equally dangerous. After the demonstration, you're allowed a few minutes of garden time. That's what they call it. Garden time. Like you're a child at recess. You step outside with a few other women and feel the sun on your skin for the first time today. It's almost startling, the warmth. You blink, briefly overwhelmed. The garden is pristine, trimmed hedges, koi ponds, stone lanterns, all arranged with absurd symmetry. Even nature here has been curated. You walk slowly, not too close to the others, just enough to seem sociable. A cluster of girls giggles by the carp pond. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. Then you see him, not the lord, not anyone noble, just a gardener bent over a patch of moss, adjusting stones with careful hands. He doesn't look up, doesn't speak, but there's something soothing about his presence. You watch him for a moment longer than is appropriate, then look away. Just a flicker of something unspoken. A moment. It will be forgotten. Or not. The bell sounds again, once, twice, then 3 times. Afternoon is coming. The pace of the day will quicken, assignments will sharpen, games will deepen, and you'll be expected to play them all. Lunch is not an escape. It's another ritual, another test, another stage. You return to the dining quarters along with the others, weaving through polished corridors and the scent of sandalwood growing faint beneath the sharper edge of pickled plum. The women file in slowly, each of you taking your places on individual mats. Everything here is divided: space, sound, food, breath. You kneel, straighten your back, rest your hands in your lap. Your kimono tightens slightly at the waist as you exhale. A pair of servants, silent as ghosts, glide in with trays of food. No voices, just the clink of porcelain, the rustle of cloth. Your meal today is a careful arrangement: steamed white rice, a bite of grilled mackerel with daikon, miso soup, and a few artfully shaped vegetables pickled into little pink and green blossoms. It looks more like a painting than a meal. You bow your head once before beginning. No one eats quickly. You chew with intention, eyes lowered, posture fixed. Elbows in, mouth closed, no noise. To eat in silence is to show self-control. You're being watched. Not obviously, but always. A single grain of rice left in your bowl might mark you as wasteful. Finishing too fast might make you look greedy. Even the way you lift your chopstick speaks louder than words. Across from you, a girl with sharp cheekbones and a sharper tongue delicately nibbles a sliver of sweet egg omelette. She glances at you sideways, then lets her gaze drift away again. You can feel the judgment behind that 1/2 second look. She was once a favourite too, until the Lord's attention slipped elsewhere. You suspect she wants it back, and you're now in her way. It's always like this. Quiet tension wrapped in silken layers. The food may nourish your body, but the act of eating is psychological combat. Everyone seated here knows they're performing, some better than others. You finish your meal and bow your head again as your tray is taken away. You keep your face neutral, your movements smooth. No twitching, no fidgeting, no stretching. Any show of comfort could be misread as arrogance, or worse, laziness. After lunch, you're not dismissed. You're repositioned. That's what the matron calls it. Today, you're assigned to an embroidery chamber, one of the quieter rooms used for demonstration work and high craft practice. You slip off your shoes before entering, tucking them neatly beside the door with the toes facing out. A girl once forgot to do that, and she was removed from the next 5 events. Not punished openly, but silenced in plain sight. Inside, the embroidery chamber smells of fresh linen and ink. Baskets of silks are arranged like petals, red, gold, indigo, pearl white, each spool more expensive than you'll ever be. You take your place at a low table, pull a half-finished piece toward you, and begin stitching where you left off, the edge of a peony. The petals curve outward, and you follow the pattern with a kind of mechanical grace. In here, your hands must say what your mouth never will. Embroidery isn't just a feminine art, it's political. A gift for the wrong person could spell disaster. A misstitched character could be read as an insult. Every needle is dipped in diplomacy. The piece you're working on now, destined for a visiting daimyo's second wife, must be perfect. He's powerful and she's petty. One misplaced thread and the entire court might hear about it. You focus on the silk beneath your fingers, but your mind wanders. This morning's assignment, prepared, still echoes in your thoughts. What does it mean today? Last week, a girl who got that label was summoned to serve tea during a political meeting. She barely spoke, but her sleeve brushed the Lord's hand, and 3 days later her status rose. Another girl, same label, was sent to comfort an aging relative of the shogun. She returned a week later, paler, quieter, with a slight limp. She hasn't been seen in 2 days. You finish the last curl of a golden thread and exhale slowly. Around you the other women stitch in silence. Only the occasional murmur from the head embroiderer breaks the hush. She moves between you all like a priestess, correcting posture, adjusting tension, testing you. Sometimes she'll ask a question. What does the pine tree represent? And you'd better know the answer. Endurance, by the way. Always endurance. Here's a curious fact you wouldn't expect. Some high-status concubines actually manage small groups of artisans like this. If you rose high enough in rank, you might not just sit and stitch, you'd oversee, manage, instruct. In some cases, concubines even became patrons of poetry, painting, and textiles, their personal tastes influencing entire palace styles. It's a soft form of power. But power all the same. After embroidery, the matron appears again. No fanfare. She simply stands in the doorway, and every girl in the room bows low without needing to be told. Her presence is the signal that something is shifting. When she calls your name, you don't react. Not outwardly. You rise, bow again, and follow her without a word. She leads you down a side corridor, quieter, more shadowed. The floorboard's older and rougher. This isn't the path to the Lord's quarters, not yet. This path winds toward the women's archives. A strange place, one you've only been to once. Inside, it's cooler, dimmer. Shelves line the walls, scrolls, folded letters, ancient books sealed with cords. You're not here to read. No one's here to read. You're here to be tested. The matron sets down a cloth bundle on the floor and opens it. Inside is a small selection of calligraphy tools. Brush, inkstone, paper, and narrow red cord. Write a reply, she says. Then she gives you a short letter. No name, just lines of poetic longing. Something about plum blossoms falling too early and a heart that refuses to sleep. It's probably a test of your ability to craft a response that's delicate, layered, and open to interpretation. Like everything in the court. You sit cross-legged, grind the ink into the stone, dip the brush, and begin. Your strokes are fluid, almost automatic now. You answer the metaphor with your own, something about the moon missing the sun and the illusion of warmth. You don't sign it. Of course not. The mystery is the point. When you hand it back, the matron doesn't praise or critique. She just folds it and tucks it into her sleeve. You may never know where it ends up, or who reads it, but someone will, and that someone matters. There's an old court tale you remember. A concubine once wrote such a breathtaking poem in response to a nobleman's veiled love letter that it was carved onto a palace wall. Then she vanished. Some say she was promoted, others say she was silenced for being too clever. Either way, she was remembered. And in this life, that might be all that matters. The women's quarters are never truly silent, though most sounds there are trained to be. Whispered conversations float like incense smoke between rooms, carefully measured in tone and volume. You've learned to distinguish between harmless murmuring and the sort of gossip that draws blood in the right hands. After your calligraphy test, you're sent back to the main chambers to rest. Rest in this context means pretending to nap or reflect while your ears stay open and your posture remains composed. You settle onto your futon, tucked neatly in the corner of your chamber, and fold your hands over your lap as if in prayer. The silk pillow smells faintly of lavender. Someone must have replaced the sachet this morning. You breathe slowly, eyes closed so as just enough to suggest calm, but your mind is spinning. You've been labelled prepared today. No elaboration, no whisper of context, and now the matron has collected your handwritten reply to a love letter that may or may not be real. Someone is watching, someone is making decisions about your next step. It could mean favour, it could mean removal. You don't know which one would feel worse. Outside your door, slippers shuffle and soft voices murmur. You pick out Lady Chikako's high laugh, a little too loud, a little too pointed. She only laughs like that when she wants to be overheard. She's probably talking about last night's summons, or who cried after not receiving one. Then there's Lady Asami's voice, quiet and sharp, always riding just under the others like a knife slipped beneath silk. They're not speaking to you, but they're definitely speaking about you. One of the younger girls passes your room and pauses just long enough to adjust her robe. A sideways glance, a half smile. You don't return it. You're not sure if it was meant to comfort you or warn you. This is the rhythm of the women's quarters. Long hours of doing nothing on the surface while tension coils beneath every silken sleeve. It's a place where boredom is rarely honest and silence is never empty. It's where the most powerful weapon you possess isn't your beauty or skill, but your ability to listen without being caught listening. You're summoned to the veranda later for air. That's how the matron phrases it. For air. As if you haven't breathed all day. The veranda isn't open to the public, of course. It's a sheltered space facing the inner gardens, with enough privacy to make you feel like you've left the world, though you haven't, not really. You step outside into filtered sunlight. The sky is pale, overcast but not gloomy. The cherry trees are beginning to bloom, little pink explosions that flutter in the breeze like dying butterflies. You lower yourself onto the wooden platform, legs tucked beneath you, hands resting in your lap. Across the garden you spot another concubine sitting in mirrored posture. She doesn't look at you, but she knows you're there. A servant girl brings you a tiny cup of plum wine, sweet and sharp. You sip slowly, pretending not to notice the two attendants standing behind the screen nearby. Chaperones. They're always listening. Maybe not to report you. Maybe just because they have nothing else to do, but still you mind your words. The girl across from you finally speaks. He watched you during the music lesson, she says, still not looking your way. You keep your gaze forward. He watches everyone. She hums once. Not like that. You don't answer. The moment stretches like silk being pulled too tightly. Then she adds more quietly, I hope it's you. You're better than most of us. You finally turn to face her. Her expression is unreadable. There's no sarcasm, maybe even a trace of sadness or resignation. You want to thank her, but you don't. You just nod. The truth is, within this carefully regulated world of hierarchy and masks, friendships form like cracks in porcelain. They're hairline fractures, almost invisible but real enough to shatter you when pressure builds. You've grown close to girls you no longer see. You've wept for girls who smiled the night before they vanished. And yet, you can't stop forming those bonds, even knowing the risk. Maybe especially because of the risk. Historically, the women's quarters of high-ranking lords were designed not just for beauty and control, but for separation. A palace within the palace. The Uku of Edo Castle, for example, was a fortress of women, entirely self-contained, governed by rules more rigid than any battlefield. Some scholars debate whether these inner communities became secret worlds of female agency or gilded cages filled with repression and rivalry. You suspect the answer is yes. You finish your plum wine and return the cup. The servant bows and collects it silently. You rise. Back inside, the atmosphere has shifted. The matron is waiting in the corridor, her eyes scanning the returning girls one by one. When they land on you, she tilts her head, barely, and gestures for you to follow. You don't ask questions, you lower your head and step into place behind her. She leads you to a smaller chamber near the back of the compound. You've only been here once before, months ago, when you first arrived. It's an evaluation room. Padded mats, polished mirrors, a low table with ink and scrolls. Today the mirrors are covered. That's unusual. A woman is already waiting inside. You don't know her. She's not dressed like the other attendants. Her robe is darker, her face bare of paint, her posture relaxed but alert. She studies you for a long moment, then gestures toward the centre of the room. You may sit. You kneel, careful not to let your robe bunch or wrinkle. I've been asked to assess your refinement, she says. Her voice is low and clear. Don't answer unless I ask you a question. Understood? You nod. She watches you with steady eyes as she begins. Recite the first verse of the tale of Genji. You do, slowly. Your voice steady, even though your heart beats like a trapped moth. She nods. Tell me 3 flowers appropriate for a summer kimono. You answer. Asagao, Nadeshiko, Tachibana. She watches, still silent. Then, why should a concubine know the difference between silence and stillness? You pause, just long enough to show that you're thinking, not hesitant. Because silence hides, stillness listens. She doesn't smile, but she nods again. Good, she says, and stands. The matron returns. The other woman whispers something in her ear, then exits without a backward glance. You're left alone in the room for a moment, breath barely moving in your lungs. Something has changed. You don't know if it's the beginning of your rise or your fall. The chamber stays still after the woman leaves, a kind of vacuum where sound used to be. The silence now feels like it's watching you, thick and deliberate, like it has its own ears. You remain kneeling even after the matron returns. She doesn't speak, just looks at you with that tight, unreadable expression she wears when something delicate is being decided. Her hand gestures, barely, and you rise. Your knees crack softly beneath the folds of your silk, but you don't wince. She leads you out again, this time with fewer words than usual. That says more than anything. You're not sent back to your quarters. Instead, you're taken down a side corridor deeper into the women's section. The air cools as you walk, shadows settling under the eaves of the wooden ceiling. You've never been this way before. That alone means something. Your heart tightens a little. This could be good. This could be very, very bad. The room you're brought to is unfamiliar. Bare walls, a long table, incense burning at both ends like a quiet ritual. 3 other concubines are already seated inside, all older than you, higher ranked. You know their names. Lady Kano, with her sharp jaw and swan-like neck, rumoured to be a silent advisor to the Lord himself. Lady Maru, quiet but clever, who once arranged for her cousin's marriage through a single line of poetry, and Lady Sada, beautiful in that unreachable way, like she was carved from glass and will never forgive you for breathing near her. They glance at you without expression as you enter. The matron instructs you to sit. You do, folding your knees to one side the way you were trained. There's a tension to the air, not cruel, not hostile, but dense. Something is happening. Lady Kano speaks first. You've been selected. 3 words, that's all, no explanation. But everything tightens behind those words. You keep your face blank. Inside, your mind is whirling. Lady Maru adds, he will be choosing one of us for tomorrow night's lantern ceremony. It's not a formal summon, but it's... She pauses, glancing toward the incense. Symbolic. Lady Sada finally speaks, her voice like snow falling through dry leaves. This is your first time being considered. That word, considered, echoes through your ribs like a bell. You're dismissed after that. No further discussion, just a nod from the matron, and then you're escorted back toward your quarters, but you don't go all the way in. Instead, you're directed toward a preparation room, an in-between space used for grooming, adjustments, last-minute styling. A pair of attendants waits for you, along with a tray of face oils and fresh silks. They don't speak. They begin removing your current robe with practiced hands, folding it as if it might break. Then they begin again. Powder is reapplied. Lips are painted in a deeper red. Your eyebrows reshaped just slightly, thinner, longer, more graceful. Your hair, unpinned and restyled, now forms a longer, looser arrangement, a look reserved for evening appearances, not for intimacy necessarily, but for being seen. One of the attendants slips something into your sleeve, a fan. You open it briefly, painted pine trees on one side, crashing waves on the other. A balance of permanence and chaos. A message, perhaps, or just art. You never really know in this place. The gown they dressed you in is bolder than the ones you've worn before. Deep violet silk embroidered with silver threads that catch the light when you move. The hem features cranes mid-flight, their wings curved in a perfect arc. You know what that means. Aspiration. Not grounded. Not yet. Here's something many don't realise. Every kimono in the court is part of a communication system, like birdsong or semaphore. The colour, pattern, material, even the way it's knotted, they all mean something, and they're read instantly by those trained to see, and wearing this violet robe tonight will mark you not only as visible, but as a potential. Before you leave, a servant murmurs a rare directive. You'll dine separately tonight, with the others. You nod, then follow her. The dining chamber is quiet, almost dim. Lanterns flicker low against the walls. The other three are already seated, Kano, Maru, and Sada. You join them, aware of how strange it feels to sit beside women whose names have always come with cautionary tales and subtle warnings. The food tonight is richer. Seasoned eggplant, grilled eel, sticky rice shaped into perfect triangles, soup served in porcelain that's painted with chrysanthemums. You eat slowly, precisely. The other women speak in half sentences, observations about the weather, the quality of the calligraphy brushes, a visiting monk whose sandals were the wrong colour. Gossip, but refined. At one point, Lady Kano turns to you and says, "If he chooses you, speak only in answers. Let him ask the questions." Lady Maru leans in slightly. "Unless he pauses, then give him something beautiful but short." Lady Sada smirks without looking. "And if he touches your fan, don't breathe too fast. It shows fear." You nod again. These are not suggestions. These are rules passed down like heirlooms, fragments of survival. Here's the curious thing. Despite everything, there's a strange intimacy in this moment. 4 women dressed in symbols, trained to the point of exhaustion, sharing a meal that's more performance than nourishment. And yet they're giving you the closest thing to mentorship this world offers. They don't love you, but they don't want you to fail either. At least not tonight. When dinner ends, the 4 of you are led to the northern garden, a hidden space behind the palace's main hall, where a narrow stream runs beneath cherry trees. The Lord will walk this garden soon, as he does before every major celebration. His presence alone will determine who is summoned next. Your position near a bridge, the scent of moss and running water rising up around your feet. The fan in your hand feels heavier now. The air is crisp with early evening chill, and fireflies have begun to blink lazily across the stones. You stand perfectly still. Then he appears. He moves quietly, no entourage, dressed in simple robes far less elaborate than yours. But that simplicity is power. He stops first near Lady Sada. She bows, says nothing. He lingers, then moves. Past Lady Maru, a small word is exchanged. You can't hear it. His voice is low. Then Lady Kano, a longer pause, a compliment. You think, and then you. He stops, just close enough for you to smell the faint scent of cedar and ink. His eyes sweep over your robe, your face, the fan in your hand. "Waves and pines," he says softly. "Stability or longing?" You reply evenly. Only the one who stands beneath them knows. He smiles, just slightly. His fingers touch the edge of your fan. You remember. Don't breathe too fast. You don't. He walks on, "No summon. Not yet, but not nothing." You wait. The other women breathe out as one. The moment passes. But everything has changed. You return to your quarters without a word. No one says anything. No one needs to. The scent of the pine trees still lingers in your mind, and the image of his fingers brushing your fan replays over and over like a quiet mantra. That was not a summons, but it was a mark. You've been noticed, and in the palace that is the beginning of everything, or the start of your undoing. Inside your chamber, a fresh robe has been laid out, a sign that someone, likely the matron, has already moved you into a different category. The robe is simpler now, pale blue with a soft wave pattern, suggesting serenity. It's for sleeping, but it's not a dismissal. It's transitional. You disrobe, careful to hang the violet kimono yourself. You smooth it out, fold it perfectly, even though your hands tremble slightly. As you kneel to remove your hairpins, your mind drifts back to what Lady Kano said. Speak only in answers. You wonder how many women were undone by saying too much, too soon, or too sincerely. You wonder if the woman who wrote that legendary response about plum blossoms also stood on a bridge like you did, with fireflies blinking around her and 1,000 years of silence in her throat. You place the last pin beside your mirror, then sit and look at yourself again. Not the reflection you prepared this morning, or the one that wore the violet and silver and answered riddles beneath the cherry blossoms. This version of you looks tired, a little older, still composed, but underneath something stirs. Maybe it's pride or fear, or maybe finally a sense of beginning. Before sleep you're summoned once more, not to the Lord but to the brushroom. You don't know why. The brushroom is used for copying sutras mostly, a quiet place filled with paper, ink, and the faint rustle of devotion. You expect it to be empty, but it's not. Lady Chikako is there, seated cross-legged with a brush in her hand and a scowl softening into something more complicated. She doesn't look up as you enter. The matron who escorted you here simply says, "You may share the inkstone." That's rare. Sharing ink means something. It's not intimacy exactly, but it's not nothing. You kneel beside her. For a few minutes neither of you speaks. The only sound is the rhythmic scratch of brush on paper, the faint sigh of silk shifting with each movement. You're not copying scripture. The paper set out for you is blank. You can write what you like. You think for a moment, then begin. A poem, short, cautious, unfinished. You let it trail off halfway through, let it suggest more than it says. When you glance over, you realise Chikako's brush has stopped moving. She's reading your lines sideways, with that familiar narrowed gaze. The water's reflection doesn't lie, she murmurs, but it doesn't show depth either. You bow slightly. It's not agreement or disagreement, it's acknowledgement. She sets her brush down, blotting the excess ink with a small pad. He looked at you too long, she says, not bitter, just observant. He used to do that with me, 3 years ago. You look at her, not directly, just enough. I thought it meant I would rise, she continues, but I stayed exactly where I was. The only difference was that everyone else hated me a little more. You consider her words, let them sink in like ink into parchment. This is not cruelty. This is a gift wrapped in a warning. Don't be clever, she adds, be necessary. You nod. And if I can't? She turns, finally meeting your gaze. Then be invisible. It's one of the most honest things anyone has said to you here. There's a peculiar fact most people never learn about the lives of concubines. While official training emphasised beauty, etiquette and obedience, much of the real education came from one another, passed like a secret scroll line by line from senior to junior, in shared glances and midnight conversations. Historians argue over how much power concubines really had, but the women inside knew. Power wasn't in position, it was in perception. You finish your line, blow lightly on the paper, and roll the poem closed. You don't sign it, you leave it on the tray. Chikako picks it up without asking. She might keep it, she might burn it. Either way it will be remembered. That's enough. Back in your chamber the lights have been lowered. Your futon has been spread again. The incense tonight is softer. Chrysanthemum, maybe. Sleep doesn't come easily. You lie there for a while, staring up at the shadows painted on your ceiling. The tree branches outside sway gently, casting long shapes that look like fingers or claws or windblown birds. You imagine what tomorrow could bring, a summons, a gift, a punishment, or nothing. In some ways, nothing is worse. Eventually, your thoughts spiral out into dreams, vague and fragrant. You find yourself walking through the palace garden again, but the trees are upside down and the fish in the stream speak riddles in your voice. When you turn to look behind you, everyone is gone. Even your own footprints vanish in the moss. You wake at dawn. The dream slips away, but the unease clings to your chest like a damp cloth. The sky is still pale, just barely brushing against morning. You rise before the matron comes, before the servants stir, before the court begins to breathe again. It's a risk, being out of bed this early, but you need a moment to yourself, just one. You walk barefoot down the hall, your robe gathered loosely around you. The paper lanterns are still lit, dimming now. You pass the night watchman. They don't acknowledge you. Perhaps they're used to this. You step into the northern garden again, alone this time. The air is cool and wet with dew. The stone path is slick beneath your toes. You reach the bridge where he touched your fan. It looks different now, smaller, just wood and paint and memory. You stay there for a long time, unmoving, until the bell chimes once, calling everyone to wake. You turn and walk back. Tomorrow is coming, and you have work to do. The first bell is never loud, but it slices through the compound like a thread being pulled tight. You're already back in your chamber when it rings, hair still unbrushed, robe still loosened at the collar. Technically, you're not supposed to leave your quarters without permission, especially not before sunrise. But no one stopped you, and no one saw, or at least no one important. That's a victory in its own small, trembling way. Your attendant arrives moments later, her eyes widening just slightly when she sees you already awake and seated. She bows, says nothing, and begins the quiet ritual of preparing your day. The water for cleansing is hotter than usual, and she wrings the towel out slowly, her eyes darting once toward the folded robe you wore last night. The violet one. You know she's curious. She's not alone. As she helps brush your hair, you think again about what Lady Shikako said in the brush room. Don't be clever, be necessary. It's been echoing behind your temples all night. Cleverness, you've come to understand, is dangerous here. It invites challenge. Being necessary, that's different. No one cuts the thread they still need. Your hair is coiled tighter today, your lips painted thinner. The matron has clearly given orders. This is not the day for softness. You are being crafted into something sharper, just enough edge to suggest competence, not threat. Even your robe reflects the shift. Ice grey, embroidered sparrows across the hem. Modest, controlled, observant. You're led to the inner reception hall, where the day's protocol is explained with all the ceremony of a funeral. The lantern ceremony begins tonight at dusk, and by tradition, 4 women are chosen to attend the Lord's private table after the procession. You are one of them. It's spoken simply, without fanfare, but it lands like thunder inside your chest. No celebration, no warning, just selection. You're expected to perform a tea ritual this morning, followed by floral arrangement in the Eastern study, and a poetry reading this afternoon. It's not about impressing him, it's about proving your discipline under pressure. Every step of your day has become a test. The other girls know it too. As you walk the hall toward the tea room, you pass Lady Sada in full regalia. Gold sash, lips like lacquered lacquer, gaze as calm as ice. She doesn't smile, but she inclines her head a fraction. It's the closest thing to acknowledgement she's ever given you. Maybe she's relieved not to be chosen again, or maybe she's watching you rise to measure the length of your fall. In the tea room, you kneel beside the iron kettle, already steaming. You bow to the instructor, a former concubine herself from years ago, now old enough that her joints click when she lifts the whisk. She watches every movement you make, the way you fold the cloth, turn the bowl, offer the first sip to the empty space beside you. She says nothing. That's a good sign. After tea, it's time for flowers. You're brought to the Eastern study where a shallow basin has already been filled with pebbles and water. The arrangement is a meditation in patience. You're given cherry blossoms, wild orchid, pine needles, and a single crimson peony. Each one means something. You don't get to choose what they symbolize. You only arrange them in a way that says you understand. Your fingers are steady. The blossom floats just off center, the pine curled behind like a guardian. The peony sits at the base, bright but low, grounded. The attendant overseeing you says nothing, but she adds a small red ribbon to the vase when you finish. That's a signal. Not for you, for whoever comes next. You leave the study as the sun lifts over the eastern wall. The rest of the court is stirring now, and whispers follow you like a scent trail. You hear your name once, disguised in metaphor, the third sparrow. It doesn't mean anything to outsiders, but to the girls here, It means she's been chosen, but not confirmed. It's a knife wrapped in poetry. After lunch, quiet and colourless, you're summoned to the scroll chamber. Another test. You're to read a selected passage aloud while a senior consort listens from behind a silk screen. You'll never see her. You won't even know who she is. But she'll report back. Your tone, your pace, your poise. You kneel, unroll the scroll and begin. Spring passes, and the birds forget to sing, but the flowers remember. You read slowly, evenly, letting the rhythm settle into your bones. You hear nothing on the other side of the screen, not a breath, not a shift, only stillness. You finish, bow, and leave. There's an old legend about a concubine who passed her voice test by crying in perfect rhythm with the passage. Not sobbing, just a single tear timed to the third line of the second stanza. They say the Lord was so moved he gave her own garden. Others say she was banished for being manipulative. Either way, she was never forgotten. You're given a short reprieve before the lantern ceremony begins. Back in your chamber, you sit quietly while two attendants dress you in layers of ivory silk, embroidered with silver cranes and tiny lanterns stitched near the sleeves. It's elegant, but subdued. You are not to outshine. You are to be harmonious. They paint your face again, this time with a faint shimmer along the eyelids. Not glitter, not sparkle, just a soft sheen, like moonlight caught in the corner of your eye. When they finish, you look into the mirror and barely recognize yourself. You look calm, controlled, timeless, and very, very quiet. As the sun begins to dip, you're led to the courtyard where the lanterns hang in long rows, swaying gently in the breeze. Each flame flickers to life as the procession begins, servants lighting them one by one while the court gathers to watch. The air smells of melted wax and sweet pine smoke. You're placed beside the other three chosen women. Each of you holds a long paper lantern, decorated with hand-painted symbols. Yours shows waves and blossoms. The symbolism isn't lost on you. Change and fleeting beauty. Lovely. Terrifying. The Lord appears at the far end of the court, surrounded by a soft glow. He does not speak. He simply walks, slow and deliberate, nodding to the women as he passes. When he reaches you, he pauses, takes the lantern from your hands. That's it. You've been chosen. The procession continues, but the world tilts around you like a teacup about to spill. You are led away, separated from the others. They disappear behind you in the glow of the final lanterns, and you step into something new. Not love, not yet, but power, and danger, and 100,000 quiet eyes waiting to see what you'll do next. You're not taken to his chamber. Not yet. That would be too obvious, too final. Instead, you're led through a corridor you've never walked before, one that curves gently inward, its walls made of polished cedar and inlaid with gold-threaded paper. The lantern in the matron's hand swings slightly, casting elongated shapes across the floor, shadows that move like spirits just out of reach. The air here is warmer, thicker, as though the palace itself knows something is about to shift. You pass through a small gate, then into a chamber lit by hanging silks, dyed with indigo and saffron. Incense burns low in a bronze crane's beak, the smoke curling lazily upward. You're told to wait here. A screen is pulled closed behind you, and just like that, you're alone. You sit, you wait. Every movement you make is careful. Fold your hands, keep your eyes lowered, don't touch anything, especially the scrolls stacked on the nearby lacquered table. This is a waiting room, yes, but it's also a stage. You're being observed, if not by people, then by reputation. Every word that gets whispered tomorrow will be shaped by what happens, or doesn't happen, tonight. Time stretches. The silence is so profound you can hear the soft tick of the incense ash falling into the basin. You breathe slowly through your nose, keeping your heartbeat from spiking. It's not fear exactly. It's anticipation fed by weeks of watching, listening, performing, and now finally being asked to move. When the screen opens again, it's not the Lord who enters, it's an attendant. One of his closest aides, known in the halls as the Voice, because he speaks for the Lord in matters where silence is more elegant. He bows low and exact. The Lord has requested your company, he says. That's all. You rise and follow. The walk is short but winding, designed to confuse maybe, or maybe just to ensure that nothing about this transition feels natural. The route ends at a pair of ornate doors carved with wisteria blossoms. They open without a sound. Inside is not what you expected. No grand bed, No painted screens of tigers or mountain gods. Instead, there is a small table set for two. Cushions, a tray of sweets, a folding screen half drawn to hide what lies beyond. The Lord sits already, dressed in a muted black robe that gleams faintly under the lantern light. He doesn't rise when you enter. He just lifts his eyes, the gesture enough to command a bow. You give him one, deep and slow, the kind you practice countless times in empty rooms with no audience. He gestures to the cushion opposite his. You kneel. He pours the tea himself. "I've been told you arranged the spring display in the Eastern Study," he says, voice low but clear. You nod. "Yes, my lord." The placement of the pine behind the orchid was unusual. You don't blink. "I was told it looked too perfect. I thought a little imbalance would make it feel more alive." He studies you. The silence is measured. "A dangerous approach," he says, sipping his tea, "but memorable." "This is the game, then," words disguised as compliments, questions disguised as praise. You sip your tea in silence, the bitterness grounding you. You eat nothing, though the sweets are delicate, shaped like peach blossoms, painted with edible gold. The gesture is symbolic. You're not here for food. You're here for presence. "You have a poem," he says, not asking, stating, testing, and you recite it. Not the one from the scroll chamber. This is new, composed earlier in the brush room when you couldn't sleep. The moon does not ask whether it reflects the sea, and still it appears whole. He sets his teacup down. You write as though you've already lost something. You meet his gaze, just for a moment. "I write as though I know I will." He laughs once, not loudly, but with something like approval, maybe amusement. You can't tell. You're not supposed to know. He reaches for your fan. The one you didn't know you'd need. You pass it to him without hesitation. His fingers run along the edge. "Waves and blossoms," he says. A curious match. "Waves carry blossoms farther than trees ever could," you reply. That earns another pause. Then he stands. You rise as well. Still no sign of invitation, no command, but his next words seal the moment. "Return tomorrow evening," he says. "I find you interesting." He doesn't smile, but he doesn't need to. You bow again, deeper this time, and are led away by the same aid. He says nothing, only guides you through the same winding path back toward your world. You're not taken directly to your quarters. Instead, you're brought to a quiet room near the back of the women's compound, a guest chamber rarely used. Inside is a futon already laid out, a soft robe, a tray of fresh water. No attendants, just space. You're to sleep alone tonight, in silence. The meaning is clear. You are now in between. Not yet a favourite, but no longer ordinary. Here's a historical curiosity most textbooks miss. Concubines often experienced a testing phase once they caught a lord's attention. It wasn't formalised, but it was understood. They'd be watched, evaluated not just on how they behaved in private, but how rumours moved around them. Some rose fast, others disappeared before the next moon. Some never knew which they were until it was too late. As you lie down, staring at the woven ceiling above you, the events of the evening blur at the edges. His voice, low and curious. The tea, the fan, your poem. You touched something tonight. Or maybe something touched you. It could mean a rise or an erasure, but it will mean something. You sleep beneath that thought, its weight both terrifying and strangely comforting. The next morning doesn't come with trumpets or proclamations. It begins like every other, quietly, politely, with the scrape of sandals in the hallway, and that's the sound of water being poured just out of view. But you know before you even open your eyes that something has changed. It's in the air, in the way your futon has been smoothed again during the night, the way the robe laid out for you is softer, lined with fresh cotton, and embroidered with a barely there mist pattern, subtle, expensive, and entirely different from what you wore the day before. You sit up slowly, letting the silence settle over you. There are no voices outside your door, no shuffling of the other girls. Wherever you are now, it's just outside their orbit, not entirely apart, not entirely included. That dangerous, weightless place the others speak of in riddles but never name aloud. Your attendant enters, not your usual one. This girl is older, her movement steadier, her bow deeper. She doesn't speak unless necessary. She washes your hands with warm water, scented faintly with citrus and green tea, dries them carefully, and offers you your morning robe. You notice her sleeves are embroidered, something attendants don't usually have. That tells you what you already suspected. She's been reassigned to you. Temporarily or not, you're under new watch. She helps arrange your hair, simpler today, not the elaborate coil of high court ceremony, but something understated, intimate, as though you're to be viewed up close. Your face is powdered, lips tinted with rose, and she doesn't speak a single word as she slides a fresh ribbon into the final knot. It's pale gold, nearly invisible in the dark sheen of your hair. A sign. But of what? There's no breakfast waiting. Instead, the matron herself appears, flanked by two other women you've only seen from a distance. Senior attendants, record keepers, the kind who observe and never comment, like statues with ink-stained fingers. They enter with such precision that it feels choreographed. You will remain apart today, the matron says, until evening. You are to speak with no one, and no one will be permitted to speak to you. You bow in acknowledgement. The matron's voice remains cool, but there's something beneath it. Expectation, maybe, or warning. You've been seen, she adds, and that phrase hangs in the air like smoke. Seen. The word carries more weight than it should. It doesn't just mean noticed. It means entered into record, witnessed, placed on the invisible stage every girl in the palace dreads and longs for. They leave you after that, closing the screen behind them with a whisper of motion. You're alone again, and that's when the silence becomes heavy. It's not like the quiet of the scroll chamber or the soft hush of the bathhouse. It's a different breed of stillness. Weighted, watchful. You're in a holding pattern, like a moth suspended in amber, perfectly preserved and utterly immobile. You spend the morning in the garden chamber adjoining your quarters. It's small, enclosed by latticed wood and narrow windows. Inside there's a bonsai tree, a rock basin with trickling water, and a single paper screen painted with mountains. You kneel by the tree and rake the gravel slowly, forming careful waves. You do it not because you enjoy it, but because you must do something, anything, to keep your hands busy. Movement keeps the nerves from climbing too far into your throat. Occasionally a servant passes the doorway, glancing in without meeting your gaze. Their faces are unreadable, their pace is unchanged, but you know they're cataloguing everything. The day stretches. There is no assignment, no music, no practice session. You aren't given a scroll to copy or a tray of silks to arrange. Instead, you're simply left to exist. And in this place, existing without purpose is a kind of test in itself. You begin to feel like a vase on display, gazed upon, not used. You remember a story one of the older concubines told during your first week here, whispered during a late-night sewing session when the matron had left the room. There was once a girl the Lord watched for 7 days straight. Never spoke to her, never summoned her, just watched. And on the 8th day, he sent her back to her village. Said she was too perfect, like a painting you couldn't touch. You hadn't understood then how that could be a punishment. Now you do. Afternoon comes and the tea service is brought to your room. You're not expected to drink it with anyone. The tray is set before you in complete silence. Just a cup of matcha, a sliver of sweet bean cake shaped like a lotus blossom, and a folded letter resting beside the saucer. No seal, no signature. Your heart stops for a beat before you reach for it. The calligraphy is elegant and restrained, the sort used by high officials or very skilled courtiers. Inside, a single haiku. Lanterns in spring fog. One flickers, unsure it burns, or has just been seen. There's no name, but you don't need one. You know who sent it. And now the message is clear. You've been invited back, not commanded. Invited. That's rarer than people think. A command you can obey. An invitation? That's more dangerous. It asks you to choose and to risk being judged on how you do. Here's a little historical secret. Concubines in certain ranks were sometimes granted a night to respond. Not to accept or decline, no one declines, but to prepare. To respond in kind with poetry, gesture, or a meaningful silence. Your response tonight will speak louder than anything you've said so far. You place the note back onto the tray untouched. You don't smile, you don't weep, you just sit a little straighter. You know what's coming now. Evening arrives like a shadow sliding across the floor. Your robe for tonight is different from all others, cream-coloured with a thin thread of silver spiralling like wind through reeds. It's not loud, it's not even particularly eye-catching, but it's chosen for its meaning. It's what a breeze wears when it wants to be felt, not seen. You're brought not to the usual path that leads to the Lord's quarters, but through the back corridors, past a room you didn't know existed, a small chamber lined with pale gold screens, and a single low table set for two. I've attended just a lantern and two cushions. He is already there. You bow. Deeper this time, slower. You hold it a moment longer than before, not to show submission, but reverence, the kind that's been earned, not demanded. He gestures, you sit. He pours the tea again, the same way, one cup, then the second, and then he speaks. Your silence today said a great deal. You answer with a steady voice. Sometimes silence says more than performance. He nods, but performance leaves room for imagination. You smile, just barely. Then I will perform carefully. He laughs again. You've come to know that sound now. It's approval, hidden in mirth. You've passed another gate. He offers the letter you received earlier. You bow and place it beside your cup, untouched. Would you answer it? He asks. Yes, you reply, but not in words. He watches you for a moment, then rises. Then tomorrow night, show me. He leaves you with the tea, the poem, and a doorway that doesn't close behind him. You stay there for a long time, breath slow and steady. You have until tomorrow to decide how to answer, and every girl in the palace will be watching. The following morning arrives not as a relief, but as a quiet challenge, whispered between the rafters. The sky outside your paper window is still grey, the sun reluctant to rise, but the palace is already awake. You can hear it, in the rustling of silk, the muffled rhythm of footsteps, the soft clack of trays being moved into position. The day hasn't begun for most heirs, but for you, it never really ended. You spent the night replaying every syllable he said, every pause, every angle of the half-smile that flickered across his lips when you told him you'd answer without words. Now you have to deliver something that isn't a poem, isn't a performance, yet is somehow both. Something that speaks without speaking, something dangerous but beautiful. Your new attendant enters quietly, bowing with more gravity than yesterday. She sets your washing cloth on the edge of the basin and waits. You cleanse yourself without speaking, noting how the water is warmer than usual and lightly perfumed with chrysanthemum. A detail, a signal you are still being watched. After you dress in your morning robe, pale pink, nearly white, soft enough to suggest innocence but tailored sharply enough to hint at precision, you sit beside your lacquered writing table, not to write but to think. A blank sheet rests before you, the inkstone unground. You stare at it, knowing that your answer, whatever it is, will ripple through the palace like dye poured into clear water. You don't write. Not yet. The matron appears mid-morning, her expression unreadable. She doesn't ask what you're planning. She just tells you that the other concubines will be rehearsing for an upcoming festival performance and that you are not required to attend. Again, you're being kept separate, shielded, or isolated. The line between those two things is paper thin. You nod, bow, and say nothing. Once she leaves, you begin pacing your small garden chamber. It's an enclosed square, maybe 7 paces by 7. Not a grand courtyard, but enough for air and thought. A slender maple tree stretches skyward in one corner, its leaves trembling with every breeze. You kneel beside it and watch as a single red leaf falls before its time. There, that's it. You ring for your attendant and ask for a tray, 1 scroll of fine paper, a sprig of yew blossoms if available, a silk thread no wider than your finger, and a small box of lacquered wood. She bows and disappears, returning some time later with the items, her expression curious but properly blank. You do not explain. Instead, you begin your work slowly, methodically. First you write, not a poem, but a list, not in words but in ink blots. 3 large, deliberate circles, each placed far apart on the scroll, no text, just marks, each one a placeholder, a breath. In between you draw a faint crescent, pale and incomplete, a sliver of silver ink mixed with crushed pearl. It's abstract, minimal, bold. Next, you take the blossom and press it between the folds of a small paper crane you fold by memory, without measuring, without error. Then you wrap it once in the silk thread, not tight enough to constrict, but tight enough to bind. You place the crane in the lacquered box, set the scroll inside next to it, and close the lid. This is your answer. A message that says, I am bound but not broken. I am incomplete but aware. I am offering, not surrendering. That evening before dusk, your attendant carries the box to the aid known as the voice. No words are exchanged, only a bow. The box disappears into his sleeves, and with it, your message sails into the current of palace politics like a koi released into a private stream. You do not attend dinner with the others. Instead, you are served in your chamber. Simple dishes, grilled tofu, steamed rice, a cucumber salad sliced so thin it's translucent. Nothing extravagant, nothing performative. This is not a celebration. This is a vigil. And while you eat, the gossip begins to filter through the walls. She sent something without words. It was a crane or a flower, maybe both. They say it wasn't even a poem. She's bold, but she's reckless. She'll rise. She'll vanish. All versions of the same truth. You finish your meal slowly, chopsticks resting just so, each grain of rice gathered neatly. The matron visits after the trays are cleared. She does not enter your chamber. She simply pulls back the screen an inch and speaks from behind it. He smiled when he saw it. She closes the screen again. Nothing else. That sentence blooms in your chest like ink in water. Later that night, just before the final bell rings, your door slides open once more. You don't rise. You don't startle. You've been waiting. It's the same aide. He bows. He wishes to walk with you. Not to summon, not to speak, to walk a rare thing, a public thing, and perhaps the most dangerous gesture yet. You follow him out, barefoot, into the quiet corridors where the nightingales sing beneath the floorboards. The moon is full, casting long shadows across the garden paths. The palace seems to hold its breath as you pass beneath its arches. The lord is waiting near the southern pond, hands clasped behind his back. His robe is dark green, patterned with chrysanthemums, the kind that bloom even when frost creeps in. He doesn't turn when you approach, he just speaks. "Do you believe in permanence?" You answer carefully. "I believe in the illusion of it." That makes him smile. He turns to you. His eyes are darker tonight, reflective. "I've seen many women send poems, send perfumes, even send their own hair in envelopes tied with poems soaked in tears. But you sent breath and silence. You bow your head, saying nothing. You understand what this means, don't you?" "I believe I do." "Good," he says, "because now they'll begin circling." You lift your eyes. "The wives, you ask?" "No," he replies, "the other concubines." He gestures to the path ahead. "Walk with me." You walk, together, not ahead, not behind, side by side, and it doesn't feel like love. Not yet, but it feels like being chosen. And that, in this world, is the most dangerous feeling of all. Word spreads overnight. Of course it does. You wait to the slow, deliberate drip of court gossip leaking like water through hairline cracks in the palace walls. Even before you open your eyes, you feel it in the air, too still, too rehearsed. Something unnatural about how quiet the corridors are, how your new attendant greets you with the same bow but keeps her eyes slightly lowered, as if shielding you from what's already begun. No one congratulates you, no one dares, but the silence around you has changed shape. It used to be laced with indifference, now it's tight with calculation. You've crossed a boundary, one not marked by ceremony or decree, but by attention, the kind you can't undo. As you dress, you notice your robe has been folded more precisely than usual, a subtle mark of respect. The silk is pale gold with tiny white chrysanthemums stitched into the cuffs. It's modest, even humble, but its craftsmanship is unmistakable. This is a robe given to someone who's being watched from above and below. Today's assignment is court ceremony practice. You're summoned to one of the larger chambers where rehearsals are held for events you might never attend, but must know how to survive if summoned. You join a dozen other concubines, all kneeling in a precise half circle, backs straight, hands folded. A senior woman, Lady Fujinomiya, one of the oldest living former favourites, enters in a charcoal-coloured robe, her face powdered like porcelain and set in an expression of elegant suffering. She's been brought in to instruct. That's rare. That's strategic. The lesson begins with bowing posture. How deep, how long, how wide the arms should open. She corrects you by tapping a wooden fan gently against your shoulder blade. You do not flinch. She notices. Next, the ritual serving tray. How to approach a guest, how to hold the tray with both hands while moving, how to place it without spilling a drop or making a sound. This is not just about etiquette. It's about control, balance, trust. Then comes the most important drill, placement protocol. It's a game of invisible lines, who kneels where, who sits when, who turns her face a fraction left or a fraction right, depending on rank. It's a test of awareness, and it has traps, deliberate ones, your place second in line, an unmistakable sign that your status has shifted. Behind you is Lady Kiyomi, daughter of a noble family, and once thought to be the next favourite. She does not speak to you, but when she kneels, her sleeve brushes yours, too firmly to be an accident. A quiet challenge. You pretend not to notice. Lady Fujinomiya instructs you to recite your introduction as though you've just been granted an audience with a visiting court official. You bow and deliver your practiced line. I am she who listens, she who serves, in the name of beauty, harmony, and time. Your voice is clear, calm, just a hint of reverence. Lady Fujinomiya tilts her head. Say it again, she instructs. You do, but this time she stops you midway. You serve in the name of time, she repeats, voice low and cool. What do you know of time? The room stiffens. Everyone watches. You bow slightly, adjusting your tone. I know it's the only thing we're allowed to waste slowly. There's a pause. Then, incredibly, she smiles. Better, she says. The lesson ends not long after, and as you stand, several eyes linger on you too long, some curious, some sharp. It's in the hallway afterward that the murmurs begin again. Not whispers this time, louder, bolder. That's how it works in the palace. The moment your name gains weight, it becomes currency, and currency is meant to be spent, or stolen. You overhear it near the garden wall, spoken by Lady Kiyomi herself to another girl with a fan lifted just high enough to disguise a smirk. She speaks like a poet, but walks like a commoner's daughter. The insult is wrapped in metaphor, but the intention is plain. You keep walking. Here's the curious thing about historical court ceremonies. They were often rehearsed more than they were performed, or days, even weeks, of training for events that might never happen. It was never just about readiness. It was about maintaining the illusion that every woman in the room was prepared to perform perfectly, regardless of whether she ever got the chance. By mid-afternoon you're summoned again, this time not to him, but to the embroidery chamber. A strange choice. When you arrive, you find a partially completed screen waiting for you. The design is a scene of cranes lifting from water, pale threads pulled through dark silk like moonlight. You're to complete the lower corner, just reeds and reflections, nothing grand. You kneel, thread the needle, and begin. The silence here is comforting. No titles, no games, just fabric and rhythm. You're halfway through a silver reed when you sense movement behind you. Lady Chikako enters unannounced. She kneels across from you, picks up a hoop of unfinished cherry blossoms, and begins stitching without a word. You work in tandem for some time. No conversation, no ceremony. Finally she speaks. He held the box longer than he held the fan. You pause, not out of surprise, but to show you understand. Then I suppose I answered correctly. She nods. But now you must survive them. Answer. You place another stitch. Was there something I missed? She threads her needle again, lips thin. Yes, the wives. You look up. They're watching? No, she replies. They're waiting. There's a small important difference. Because the wives can't confront you, not directly. Their power is entrenched, political, protected by marriage and title, but they can influence, they can nudge, they can whisper to a cousin who knows a monk who influences the schedule, they can make you appear sickly, less useful, less beautiful, or not at all. Chikako continues stitching, her fingers moving like she's done this in her sleep. They'll wait for a mistake, she says. Something too bold, too visible. You exhale. And if I never make one? She finally looks at you. Then they'll make it for you. You finish the last silver reed, fold the corner of the screen, and understand at last what this place truly is. The garden of ghosts and gazes, where being loved is never as dangerous as being noticed. The sun sinks low and golden when the next summons comes. Not for a lesson, not for embroidery, not even for him. It's for the evening reception, a semi-formal gathering held in one of the outer courtyards, open to select guests of the palace. and a handful of ranked women from the inner quarters. The kind of event where everyone smiles, nods, and silently counts who stands beside whom, who sits just one cushion closer to the centre than the night before. It's not an invitation, it's a test, and you know it. Your robe is prepared before the ink is dry on the announcement. An earthy ochre with an overlayer of sheer black gauze, like autumn mist clinging to fallen leaves. A bold choice, a statement of contrast, not traditional, which means someone chose it for you with purpose. The message is unclear, but the fact that there is a message is unmistakable. Your attendant fastens the layers with such meticulous care that even she seems tense. She doesn't speak the whole time. When she finally steps back, her eyes flick up to yours, searching your face for cracks. You offer none. Outside, the reception hums with soft music, the distant pluck of a shamisen, the rhythmic clack of folding fans being snapped shut, and the carefully modulated laughter of courtiers who have mastered the art of seeming amused. The air smells of roasted chestnuts and lantern smoke, the scent winding around every polished surface and painted screen. You enter from the west corridor, led by an assistant who speaks only once. You'll remain until the third poem is read. Then you may excuse yourself. It's another coded message. Everything tonight will be measured, not just what you say or do, but how long you stay. Leave too soon, and you appear ungrateful. Too late, and you seem desperate. 3 poems, that's the line you've been given to walk. Inside the courtyard, the space is divided into neat rows of cushions arranged around a central koi pond, lit with floating candles. You're seated near the outer edge, but not at the farthest point. A quiet promotion. As you lower yourself into place, you sense the eyes on you. Not openly hostile, not overt, just ever present. Watching, judging. Lady Kiyomi is here, draped in twilight blue silk and smiling as though nothing ever happens without her permission. She pretends not to see you, and in doing so forces everyone else to look your way. It's a trick. A simple one, but effective. Lady Maru sits 2 cushions down, folding and unfolding her fan like a pulse, her expression unreadable. She hasn't spoken to you in days. You suspect she's waiting to see where the tide turns before choosing whether to lift you or step on your back. Then you spot her, the Lord's primary wife, Lady Atsuko. She's seated under the painted canopy, elevated slightly above the rest, surrounded by her chosen companions. Her robe is stunning, deep crimson with gold thread patterns of cranes, but it's her eyes that hold the power. Sharp, still, alert, like a hawk trying to decide whether you're prey or competition. Your gaze meets hers for a split second too long. You bow. She does not return it. The first poem is read aloud by a young official from the ministry, something florid and dull, full of metaphors about rainstorms and resilience. Polite applause follows, cups are raised. A servant discreetly refills the wine of everyone ranked 5th or higher. You sip your tea, you don't smile, you don't fidget, you just wait. The second poem comes from one of the inner wives. This one is sharper, more clever. It mentions a fox and a whispering wind. There are laughs. The metaphor is clear. Everyone understands who the fox represents. It's you. You don't flinch. You lift your teacup again, sip, and gently set it back down. You do not let your eyes stray toward Lady Atsuko, but you know she's watching, so is everyone else. This is the dance then. You're no longer simply a woman in the palace. You're a symbol, a shift in momentum, and that makes you a target. The third poem is read by none other than Lady Chikako. Her voice is low, melodic. The poem is brief. It speaks of a mountain refusing to bow to wind. No animals, no storms, just stone. It isn't about you, or maybe it is. When she finishes, the room applauds politely, and you rise just as instructed. Not too quickly, not too slowly. You bow to the assembled guests and leave by the north corridor, the long path that circles the garden rather than cutting through it. This isn't escape, it's strategy. Halfway down the corridor you hear footsteps behind you. Quick, light. You don't turn until you hear the whisper. She didn't write it, the voice says. You stop. Lady Sada appears from the shadows, lips pressed into something almost like concern. The third poem. Chikako didn't write it. She read it, yes, but it came from the wives' chamber, Lady Atsuko's command. You blink. Why? To give you something soft to walk on, she replies, so you wouldn't stumble. You frown. She wants me to succeed? Lady Sada smiles coldly. No, she wants you to owe her. And just like that, the tightrope beneath your feet starts to shake. There's an obscure historical fact that most records skim over. The inner wife and the favoured concubine were often expected to maintain public harmony, even when there was private sabotage. A rivalry too visible would invite embarrassment for the lord. So everything was managed beneath layers of ceremony, hostility dressed up in assistance, poison in a cup of kindness. You return to your chamber with that thought coiled around your ribs like a silk rope. The lamp is already lit, the bedding smoothed. A small dish of preserved plum sits beside your tea, untouched. And a folded letter rests beneath your fan. No name, no seal. You unfold it. Your silence sings, your gaze unsettles, keep walking. No signature. But you know the ink, the rhythm. He's watching too, not from the shadows, not yet, but close enough to see how well you balance. The note doesn't leave your fingers for a long time, even after you've read it, even after you've folded it neatly again and placed it beneath the dish of plum. Your hand hovers there, fingers curled slightly like they aren't sure whether to protect the message or let it vanish. You've been gifted something slippery tonight. Praise, maybe, affection possibly, but more likely a tether. A cord you didn't ask for that now loops around your ankle, leading in his direction. The tone of it, sparse and heavy, is unmistakable. I see you, and I'm watching how far you'll go. Sleep comes late, and uneven. You drift in and out, dreaming of bridges that stretch into clouds and paper cranes that open their wings mid-flight to reveal hollow insides. When you wake, the light is soft but present, and your body aches in that quiet way that means you've been holding tension for hours without realizing. The air feels strange this morning. Not cold, not humid, just suspended, waiting. Your new attendant arrives in silence, bowing with slightly deeper deference than yesterday. Again, the robe she brings is not one of your choosing. Ivory with a faint bamboo pattern. It's restful, ceremonial. The kind of thing worn when one is meant to listen, or confess, or agree. As she helps arrange your hair into a simpler, lower knot, you ask a single question. Has the scroll courier come yet? She hesitates. Yes, my lady. And? There is no message today. You nod slowly, as though this is what you expected. The absence of a note says almost as much as the presence of one. He reached out last night. He won't again right away. That's the way this works. The palace runs not on emotion, but on rhythm. Peaks and pauses, the silence between movements. The tighter the attention, the longer the quiet that must follow. Mid-morning brings you a quiet surprise, an assignment you haven't been given in weeks. You're to practice calligraphy in the West Chamber. Alone. That in itself is unusual. The West Chamber is rarely used, except for more sensitive work. Private letters, imperial scrolls, messages too delicate for the shared halls. You walk there slowly, a scroll case tucked beneath your sleeve, and as you pass beneath the corridor's long eaves you feel the weight of eyes on your back, not hostile, not curious, just watching. Inside the chamber the floor has been swept until it shines. The windows are open just enough to let the wind rattle the paper screens, and a basin of fresh ink waits at the low table, beside several brushes arranged by size. A single sheet of gold-trimmed paper sits at the centre, blank and luminous. No instruction, no subject, just write. You kneel, you breathe, you choose the brush with the finest point and begin. At first your hand hovers, uncertain. What do you write when nothing is asked of you? But everything rides on what you choose. Then your fingers move, slow, careful. You draw one single kanji, balanced and clean. Miru. To see. It's not a poem, it's not even a line, but it's a response. If he's watching, let him read it. If someone else intercepts it, let them wonder. You finish the character, blot the edges, and leave it unrolled. When the attendant comes to collect it, you offer no explanation. She bows and carries it away like a secret too hot to hold. Back in your chambers, you expect to be left alone. But not long after the scroll is taken, a servant arrives with a different kind of message. An invitation. Not from him, from her. Lady Atsuko, the first wife. You've never been summoned to her rooms before, most girls never are. There's a part of you that wants to say no, but of course no one says no, not to the first wife, not when your future already sits like a pebble on the edge of a knife. You're led through the northern wing, where the walls are covered in scrolls from past generations of wives, elegant ink paintings of cranes, dragons, and pale-faced courtwomen whose painted eyes seem to follow you down the hall. By the time you reach the entrance to Lady Atsuko's private chamber, your feet feel 10 pounds heavier. The doors open slowly. She sits behind a folding screen decorated with wisteria vines, her silhouette unmistakable, upright, poised, as though posture alone were a throne. You bow. She doesn't invite you to sit, so you stay kneeling. "I've seen you," she says simply, without preamble. "Yes, my lady," you reply. Her voice is warm but distant. "They speak of you as though you're already something." "I am only what the palace has made me." A clever answer, but not true. You say nothing. "Do you know why I asked you here?" she continues. You hesitate. "No, my lady." She leans forward slightly, just enough for the edge of her robe to peek past the screen. Red silk, black trim embroidered with waves. The storm robe. A statement. "I asked you here," she says, "because you wrote Miru." Your breath catches. Not wait, not give, not serve. You wrote see. She lets the word hang there like smoke. "And now," she says softly, "we must decide what you want to be seen as." You don't answer. "Say nothing if you understand," she says. You say nothing. She nods once, then shifts behind the screen, signalling the end of the meeting. No further comment, no threat, no smile, just possibility. When you're dismissed, your body feels light but unsteady, like you've stepped into deeper water than you realised. What just happened wasn't an invitation, it wasn't a test, it was a pivot point, the kind few women ever experience directly. And the real message? She's willing to let you exist in her world. For now. There's a strange, almost forgotten story in the older court records about a concubine who gained the favour of both the lord and his wife. She didn't become empress, she became invisible, not erased, but untouchable. She was said to walk the halls like a shadow no one dared whisper about, feared, protected, and utterly alone. As you return to your chambers, the letter still folded under your dish of plum, you wonder if that's the path opening in front of you now. Not love, not war, but something worse, diplomacy. The garden behind your chamber is quiet this afternoon, unnaturally so. No birds, no distant laughter from the shared washing court, not even the faint rustle of feet along the gravel walk. It's as if the entire palace has paused its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. You sit beside the small stone basin, where water trickles down a bamboo pipe into a pool of pebbles, your hands resting lightly in your lap, your knees aching beneath the folds of your robe. You don't move, you don't speak, but every part of you is calculating. You saw her. Lady Atsuko. You spoke, briefly. You didn't bow too deeply, you didn't speak too soon. And now the palace has rearranged itself around you like an audience after the first act of a play, whispering about how the second might begin. You're not just visible now, you're positioned. It's a strange place to be. You're still officially a concubine, a junior member of the inner court, but now you're surrounded by a thin, invisible barrier. The kind that comes not from title, but from potential. And potential, in this place, is both shield and target. The matron appears before dusk, her expression neutral, her bow slightly deeper than usual. "You are to attend a private garden stroll this evening," she says. "A stroll, that's what they are calling it." She hands you a folded paper with instructions written in a precise hand, not his. One of his secretaries, perhaps. You're to wear subdued tones, you're to wait by the eastern pond, you're not to bring an attendant. It's informal, but it's also an order. They dress you in soft grey with pale lavender lining, almost colourless in the fading light. Your hair is pinned higher than usual, with a single comb carved from white jade. You catch your reflection as you step outside, simple but deliberate. You look like someone who could be mistaken for modest if someone didn't know what they were looking for. The path to the eastern garden winds past the outer servants' quarters, through a stand of young plum trees, their flowers already falling in white drifts. A few petals cling to your sleeves as you walk, and you resist the urge to brush them away. Everything here means something, let them cling. He is already there when you arrive, standing near the water's edge, hands behind his back. No guards, no aides, just him and a koi pond that reflects the dusk sky like burnished metal. He doesn't turn when you approach. He waits until you've bowed, then gestures to the path beside him. You walk slowly in sync. He speaks first. She called you. You don't pretend not to know who he means. She did. And you went. I did. He nods. Smart. You don't reply, not yet. Let the silence breathe. You know what this place is, he says quietly. A stage, a court, a cage. You glance sideways at him. And which of those do you see me in? He stops walking, turns to face you. All three, he says, but I wonder how much of that is your choosing. You inhale slowly. I choose nothing here. I only respond. He considers this, then softly, not true. He begins walking again, and you follow. The gravel crunches beneath your feet like distant thunder. Fireflies spark into the air, weaving between the reeds and stone lanterns. The scent of night-blooming jasmine rises gently from the far hedges. I saw what you wrote, he says. The kanji. You don't respond. I thought you'd choose something poetic, something with flourish, but instead you chose to be seen. I chose not to be misunderstood. He stops again. You're aware of what's coming? I'm aware of what could come, you say, which is often worse. He smiles faintly. I've had favourites before, he says, not as a boast, but as a confession. Most fall, some fade, a few fracture. You raise your eyes to his. And what do you think I'll do? I don't know, he replies. That's why I'm still speaking to you. You walk again, deeper into the garden now. The pond narrows into a stream lined with flat stepping stones. He crosses them first, and then you, each step measured, balanced. I'm not offering love, he says suddenly. I never asked for it. But I may offer you something else, something rarer. He stops in front of a small pavilion, a platform with open panels barely large enough for two. Space, he says, room to breathe. He sits on the cushion inside. You kneel beside him, just within arm's reach. I don't protect many people, he adds. Even fewer protect me. You don't respond. You may find, he says, that what you want here costs more than you expected. You finally meet his gaze, then I'll pay carefully. There's a pause, the longest one yet. Then slowly he reaches into his sleeve and withdraws a folded letter. The seal is his, pressed in soft wax with the crescent crest that only appears on internal correspondence. No one sees these letters unless they're meant to. He hands it to you. I'm giving you access to their archives. You blink, not out of fear, but surprise. You're trusting me with the palace records. I'm trusting you with how you read them, he says, and what you choose to remember. This is more than a stroll, it's a grant of power, small but specific, and very few women in your position ever see it. You bow low, the only response appropriate for something so dangerous. He doesn't say anything else. He simply rises, bows once, and disappears into the night with the same quiet grace he arrived with. You remain seated in the pavilion for a while, the letter in your hand like a flame wrapped in silk. The garden rustles softly, the stream gurgles beside you. You feel the eyes of the court still lingering even here, but you also feel something else, a door. Not open, not yet, but unlocked. There's a tiny, strange historical fact tucked away in a private journal from a lesser court scribe, a note about a concubine who once reviewed the palace's tax records and used them to predict the fall of a rival family. No one knows what happened to her. She vanished shortly after, but her handwriting appeared 2 years later on a private edict authorizing land reform, signed by the shogun. Some women fall, some fade. A few fracture, and some quietly learn how to build new walls behind the ones that are already crumbling. The archives are nothing like you imagined. You'd pictured something grand, rows of scrolls lined up like loyal soldiers, lacquered drawers labelled with golden characters, the scent of old wisdom rising from floorboards warmed by centuries of footsteps. What you get is much quieter. Stranger. The entrance is hidden behind an unmarked panel in the North Library. The kind no one mentions aloud, but everyone seems to know exists. A single guard stands beside it. not in armour but in muted robes, holding a short blade more ceremonial than functional. He doesn't ask your name, just steps aside when he sees the wax-sealed letter in your hand. That alone is enough. Inside, the air is cool and dry, preserved intentionally to protect the contents. The room smells of cedar, pressed rice paper, and something else. Dried ink, maybe? Or the distant breath of forgotten conversations. It's not vast, more like a warren of rooms, dim corridors lit by slit windows and candles burning low in iron cages. You step inside and let the screenfall close behind you. A clerk appears, middle-aged, soft-voiced, his hair tied back with a simple ribbon. He bows deeply, more from respect for the seal you carry than for you. Your presence is noted, he says. You may read but not remove. You may copy but not speak of what is copied. You nod. He leads you past shelves of weathered scrolls, some tied in silk cords, others kept in boxes carved with delicate reliefs. They are labelled in codes, not names. You'd need months to decipher it all. But you're not here for months. You're here for a whisper. You take a seat at a low desk beside a narrow window where the light filters in like gold dust. The scrolls placed before you are thin and worn. Some are birth records, others are logs, visitors to the inner palace, inventories of gifts from noble families, lineages of favoured consorts. You move slowly, brushing dust from the edges with the back of your hand. You start to see patterns, names repeated, names redacted, notations added later in different ink, corrections that aren't corrections but political wounds healed with pen strokes. One entry catches your eye. Lady Hisano, recorded as a junior concubine 24 years ago. Barely a sentence beside her name. But in the margin, in different handwriting, there's a single word, Kuraimichi, the dark road. A euphemism for exile. You flip back and forth, searching. There's no explanation. But on another scroll months later, her name appears again in the context of court expenditures. Stationery, ink, and 3 books purchased for her use in the Western Quarters. She was exiled, but not removed, just hidden. You read until your fingers ache. At some point, the clerk leaves you alone. No one else enters. You find another scroll detailing the court festivals from a decade prior. Attendee lists, seating arrangements, gift exchanges. It's all careful, all clean. But near the bottom, in a less formal script, you find a note scribbled between lines. If the lantern burns too long, the paper will catch. Someone wanted that remembered. Someone recorded it anyway. Eventually, the candle beside your desk flickers low, signalling your time is nearly up. You place the scrolls back where you found them and bow to the shelves like they're sacred. Because they are. You leave with no copy, no ink on your sleeves, nothing in your hands. But your mind, full. The walk back is slow, partly because the sun has already begun to set, and partly because your mind is still assembling what you've seen. Pieces falling into place slowly but with purpose. Names buried under years of silken dust. Women removed not by punishment, but by redirection. You pass a servant on your way back through the inner corridors. A boy, no more than 12, carrying a tray of ink pots. He looks up just long enough to glance at your sleeves, then bows, too deeply for someone of his rank. A message, perhaps, or a warning. When you reach your chamber, the matron is waiting. Her arms are crossed, expression cool, unreadable. Behind her, the evening robe laid out for you is darker than usual. Deep plum, almost black. It's embroidered with faint reeds and water lilies visible only when the fabric catches light. A robe for reflection or disappearance. You've been seen, she says. Again that phrase. But this time it lands differently. You begin dressing in silence. The attendant pins your hair higher, loops a longer sash around your waist. There's no ceremony tonight, no announcement, but you're being prepared all the same. You sit before your mirror and study your face. Not just the paint, the lips, the arch of the brows, but the girl underneath. She looks the same, and yet entirely different. You've read things no other concubine has read. You've stood in front of the first wife and survived. You've shared poems with the Lord and not collapsed. And now you hold secrets. The kind that don't belong to you, but bend around you like iron threads. There's a knock. Not the matron, not a servant, but Lady Maru. You rise and bow. She doesn't return it. Walk with me, she says. No explanation. You follow her out into the twilight. The path winds around the central courtyard, where garden lanterns glow like floating stars. She doesn't speak until you're alone between hedges. I heard you went to the archives. You don't confirm, you don't deny. She sighs. Then you've seen how this place eats its own. You nod once. She stops walking. There's something you need to understand, she says. Being chosen isn't a reward, it's a warning. I understand, you reply. She leans in slightly. Then understand this too. I can help you, or I can watch you fall. And I'm still deciding. You meet her gaze. Not defiant, not frightened. Just steady. You'll decide soon, you say. She stares at you for a moment, then turns and disappears into the garden path. You return to your chamber alone, and when you finally lie down, robes still clinging to your skin, you whisper to the ceiling, I am seen. Not by them, not even by him, but by the palace itself. And that's what truly matters. There's a certain kind of whisper that lives beneath palace floorboards. It moves with the rats, sleeps in the thatch of the roof, and curls into the spaces between shoji screens. It's the whisper of those who serve but do not speak, who sweep the stones, trim the hedges, pour the wine, fold the robes, and know everything. You learn in time that in the palace, it's not the lords or the wives who know the truth. It's the ones who are meant to be invisible. And lately, those invisible eyes have been fixed on you. It starts subtly. A rice ball placed in your chamber during the late hours, still warm, far too delicate to have been prepared by the general kitchen. Then a fan tucked into your sleeve by your attendant without explanation, painted with sparrows flying in uneven formation. A message, disarray, or warning. Today you're not scheduled for anything formal. No poetry readings, no garden assignments, no ceremonial appearances. A rare blank day, the kind that's meant to lull you into believing you're safe. But nothing in the palace is unstructured. When your schedule disappears, someone else's is filling up with you in mind. You choose to move deliberately. You walk the long way to the garden to be seen. You pour your own tea. You answer no questions. And when the silence hangs too long, you break it. Not with words, but with presence. Sometimes just being visible is enough to shift the entire current of a room. Around midday, you visit the koi pond in the western court. A place that's considered neutral territory. The wives rarely come here. It's used mostly by servants, minor scholars, and old women who fold paper cranes for rituals you're not invited to understand. You sit beneath the ginkgo tree, back straight, eyes forward, fan unfolded, not for heat, but for distance. Then a voice. You sit too still for someone who still bleeds. You turn slowly. It's the gardener, the same man from before. The one you saw bending over moss, hands covered in soil, eyes lowered, like he belonged to the roots. He's older than you thought up close, worn, sun-darkened, with a smile that looks permanent but never happy. You say nothing. Wait. He nods toward the water. Fish don't speak, but they hear everything. You glance at the koi, fat, colourful, drifting like thoughts. You've been noticed, he says. You raise an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. Not by the Lord, he adds, not just him, not even by his wife. He crouches beside you and drops something into the water, just a pinch of feed, but it swirls like smoke before the koi rise. You've been noticed by the staff. You inhale slowly. That's rarely a good thing. It depends, he says. Some of us want you to stay alive. There's a pause. Others are placing bets. You finally meet his eyes. They're not warm, but they're not cruel either. What kind of bet? He shrugs. How long before you get removed? How long before you're one of the ghosts? You watch the koi snap at floating morsels, careless and constant. Do they know what I've done? You ask. He smirks. They know what you haven't done. He rises, dusts his hands, and walks away without another word. You sit there for a long time afterward. The wind moves the leaves in a way that sounds like breath. Somewhere nearby, a door opens and closes. A child's voice, one of the noble's sons perhaps, laughs once, then vanishes into the quiet. Ghosts. He said it like it was obvious. And maybe it is. There are rooms no one enters anymore. Corridors where no oil is ever placed in the lanterns. Names no one says aloud. Not because those people were punished, but because they simply stopped being useful. You know their names now. You saw them in the scrolls. Some marked by red ink, others just faded. That night your door slides open without a knock. Not a servant, not an attendant, but Lady Chikako. She enters like she belongs, and for a moment you wonder if this is how she always arrives, Without ceremony, without pretense, just slipping through other people's lives like smoke. She sits. No invitation. You spoke with the gardener, she says. You nod. He was once a footman, she tells you, before he lost favour. Favour with whom? With her. Lady Atsuko. Chikako smiles faintly. He chose to keep his tongue instead of his title, so now he digs holes instead of making introductions. You wonder what kind of punishment that really is. I think he's watching over you, she says, or maybe just waiting to see if you end up like he did. You pour her tea. She doesn't say thank you, she just drinks. There's another message and she says, you pause hand mid-pour. From whom? From someone who wants to stay anonymous. You wait. She pulls a tiny scroll from her sleeve, sets it on the table between you. You don't reach for it. It says you'll be moved soon, she adds, to rooms closer to the inner garden. That's a sign you're rising. Too fast, too visibly. That's not always a reward, you murmur. No, she agrees. Sometimes it's bait. You unroll the scroll. It's a single phrase. The pine leans because the wind has weight. You fold it back up and slide it into your robe. No reply needed. Chikako stands. Her eyes linger on your reflection in the polished screen. They're going to start pulling on the strings now, she says. See which ones unravel you. Let them. She narrows her gaze. Do you even know who you are anymore? You open your fan and smile behind it. No, but I know who I need to be. She leaves with a whisper of silk and shadow. And you're alone again. Except you're not. There are eyes in the hall, in the ceiling, beneath the floor, all waiting. The palace is awake. And you are no longer a mystery. You are a story. And everyone wants to see how it ends. At first, you think it's just a draft. The room feels colder than usual when you wake the next morning, but that's not surprising. The summer rains have come early, and moisture clings to the wooden beams like it's being whispered into them from the sky. You sit up slowly, bones aching from another night of half-sleep, the dream still clinging to the corners of your vision. Something about a woman in white, walking backwards through a field of folded paper. You shake it off. Dreams are nothing here. Or rather, everything's a dream, and the worst parts are the ones that come true. But the chill doesn't lift. It wraps around your ankles even after you rise. You cross to the window and slide the screen aside. Rain taps rhythmically against the tiled roof, running in narrow rivers along the edges, dripping into the pond below. That pond looks deeper today, or darker. Your new chamber overlooks the inner garden now, just like Chikako warned. The garden is quiet, too quiet. The trees don't sway, the koi don't surface. It's like the world has held its breath, and you're the only one still moving. Your attendant enters, carefully balancing a basin of warm water and a folded robe draped over one arm. She's not your usual one. A different girl, pale-faced, eyes rimmed with purple from lack of sleep. She doesn't meet your gaze. Is something wrong, you ask? She bows too quickly. No, my lady. The words tumble out like stones, and you say nothing more. Now you're listening harder. As she prepares your hair, you hear it again, softer than breath, the faintest sound of cloth rustling where no one walks, a shadow passing across the garden stones with no feet to cast it. You freeze. There it is again. Then gone. You say nothing. You know better. The court doesn't believe in ghosts, but it absolutely believes in silence. Later, when you step into the eastern corridor, the air changes. Not cold anymore, but heavy, still. And the servants along the way all seem to find something fascinating about their own feet. Even the nightingale floors stay quiet beneath you. Then you see it, on the edge of the walkway near the lotus basin. A pale scrap of silk, soaked, torn. It wasn't there yesterday. You pick it up. It's part of a robe, ivory stitched with reeds. Like yours, but not yours. Too small that you look around, no one. A goosebump rises along your neck. You tuck the silk into your sleeve without thinking. Someone left it for you to find. Or maybe someone lost it running away. You don't want to ask which is worse. At the midday calligraphy lesson, Lady Kiyomi is absent. No explanation, no substitute. She's simply not there, and no one mentions her, which in this place is how you know something is deeply wrong. Chikako leans close to you as you grind the ink for your brush. Her breath barely grazes your ear. Did you hear her scream? You pause. No. Exactly. The scroll you're copying is old. A poem about a spirit trapped in a bell. You recognise the irony immediately. Or maybe it's not irony at all. You finish your strokes with deliberate care. The word you write is kagero, heat haze, the illusion of movement, the illusion of warmth. That afternoon, while walking alone through the East Gallery, you pass one of the older concubines seated beside a wall screen, her eyes vacant. She's whispering to herself in a rhythm, like reciting a song only she remembers. You slow, you listen. "The girl in reeds," she murmurs. "She never came back, not really." You stop. She doesn't see you. The palace took her shape, but her soul stayed in the garden. You kneel beside her. Who are you speaking of? Her eyes flick to yours. Clear, present. Then she smiles and says, "You." You leave her there, you don't report it. No one would act on it anyway. That evening the air shifts again. A sweet scent drifts through the corridors. Not flowers, not perfume, incense, burned not in celebration, but in mourning. Someone's name has been shrubbed from the dining roster. You check twice. Kiyomi. Gone. No one says it aloud. She's simply no longer included. You eat your meal slowly, silently, even as the other girls whisper behind fans and pass glances like knives. Maru doesn't speak to you that night, but her fan is closed the entire meal, a sign of respect, or grief. You don't ask. After dinner, the matron visits your room. She says only one sentence. "The Lord will not require your presence tonight." Then she leaves. Your heart lifts, then sinks. You weren't dismissed, but you were withheld. You understand now what it means. You are not being punished. You are being watched more closely. You go to sleep early, but it takes hours for your mind to settle. You dream again. This time you're walking the garden path, but it leads nowhere. Each time you turn a corner, you're back at your own door. Someone follows, a girl in reeds. She says nothing, but her eyes are full of ink. You wake with your hand clenched around your robe. The scrap of ivory silk is still in your sleeve. You unfold it in the morning light. There's a faint character stitched into the hem, barely visible. It reads, "To be replaced." You stare at it for a long time and think about Kiyomi, about the ghost in the garden, about the servant with eyes ringed in purple, and about yourself, and what part of you might already be gone. The garden path is different now. You still walk it every morning, pretending to admire the lotus buds and the way dew clings to the bamboo. But everything has a sheen of unreality, like someone repainted the scenery overnight with too much gloss. You've been trying to forget about the silk scrap in your sleeve, now folded into a box beneath your futon, hidden away like a piece of contraband. But you can still feel it, not the fabric, the weight of it, a sliver of someone else's vanishing. Lady Kiyomi's name hasn't been spoken in 3 days. Her chamber has been reassigned to a junior concubine barely 15 who smiles too easily and bows too low, probably unaware she's moving into a room still heavy with the perfume of a woman who didn't leave by choice. The mats have been scrubbed, the bedding replaced, the mirrors polished to a blinding shine. But no matter how hard they clean, the air still tastes like something unfinished. Today's assignment pulls you deeper into the theatre of formality, a private session with the pleasure tutor. You'd almost forgotten such a position existed. Her name isn't listed publicly and she doesn't attend formal ceremonies. But you've heard of her, the woman who trains concubines not just in poise and conversation, but in the quiet arts, the ones only performed behind closed doors. Not every girl is chosen for these sessions, only the ones being prepared for longevity. You're escorted to her chambers, which are nothing like the rest of the palace. No lanterns, no sharp lines. Everything here is soft, cushions piled in corners, low candlelight, the scent of jasmine and white sandalwood. The windows are covered in gauze that lets in light without shape. She enters without shoes, without sound, and sits across from you like mist settling on water. "You've been called," she says, "but not taken." You nod. She pours tea but doesn't drink it. "You must understand something," she says. "Being chosen once is survival. Being chosen again is strategy, but being kept, that's performance." You lower your eyes. "Not the performance he sees," she adds, "the one everyone else sees." The lesson doesn't involve touch. Not today. Instead, she teaches you how to breathe when someone else is listening, how to laugh just enough, where to place your hands during silence, the rhythm of stillness. It's not about seduction, she tells you. It's about timing and usefulness and appearing irreplaceable. You ask her once, at the end, how many favourites have you trained? She sips her tea finally, enough to know which ones disappear first. And the ones who stay, she smiles. They never look surprised when they're forgotten. You leave her chamber more aware of your body than ever. Your walk, your breath, the way your fingertips brush your robe. You pass 3 servants on your way back. None speak. One bows too deeply. By the time you return to your room, there's a letter waiting. It's folded into the shape of a crane. No seal. Inside, one line. You do not yet know the shape of your shadow. There's no name, but you know who wrote it. He never uses titles, just ideas. You burn the letter, not out of fear, but because the paper itself feels like an echo that won't stop if left intact. That night, the summons arrives at sunset. The same aide, quiet, unreadable, eyes always just below yours. You're expected, he says. No ceremony. You are led not to the main quarters, but to a side chamber you've only seen from a distance. It's circular, lit with floating lanterns, the air filled with the scent of pine resin and crushed plum. The floor is padded, the ceiling low. This isn't a room for audience, it's for intimacy, but not necessarily touch. He sits near the centre on a thick cushion, dressed in grey and navy, a single silver thread circling his sleeve, a sign of contemplation. You bow. He doesn't rise, he doesn't need to. He gestures for you to sit beside him, not across. Beside, you do. There is tea, but he doesn't pour it. Instead, he speaks. They say Lady Kiyomi was unwell. You stay silent. He glances sideways at you. And yet she seemed perfectly well the last time I saw her. I wouldn't know, you answer quietly. No, he agrees, but you noticed her absence. You don't deny it. She fell, he says, and the court needed someone to fill the air she left behind. You wait. I've given you too much room, he says softly, and I wonder if you've begun to forget who owns this space. You turn toward him slowly. I remember, you say, but I've never once believed I could keep it. That makes him smile. Good. He leans back, folding his hands over his lap. I've had favourites who begged for permanence, others who tried to disappear before they were asked to. And me. You keep showing up, he says, and not apologising for it. There's a long pause between you. Finally, he reaches into his sleeve and pulls out something small. A box, black lacquer, trimmed in copper. He sets it in your hands. Inside, a ring, bone white carved with delicate waves. A token, not of love, but of position. You'll wear this at court, he says, but not all the time. You nod. This doesn't make you safe, he adds. I know. This doesn't make you chosen. I know. This makes you visible. And that's the real danger. You bow low, cradling the box like a secret you've yet to earn. He rises then, alone, no goodbye. You leave moments later, walking the quiet halls with the ring pressed against your palm like a coin slipped into the mouth of the dead. Back in your quarters, you set the ring on your pillow and stare at it. This is the moment people warn you about. Not the moment you fall, not the moment you rise, but the moment you're marked. You hide the ring in your sleeve before sleep, but in your dream it glows like fire, and every girl who's vanished reaches toward it, whispering your name. The ring is light, but it pulls on your hand like a stone. You wear it the next morning because you're supposed to, because the order was clear, and in the palace, obedience is a performance of survival. But you do not wear it casually. You do not flaunt it. You don't even let your sleeves part far enough for anyone to catch more than a glimpse. Because now that you've been given a symbol, you've also been given a target. The effect is immediate. As you enter the dining hall for the morning meal, all conversation falters for just a breath. You hear the subtle intake of breath, the twitch of a fan, the barely audible rustle of someone adjusting their posture. It's not that they're surprised you're here. They're surprised you're here like this. You kneel in your assigned place, not at the centre, not at the edge, the position of watching and being watched. Your rice is served first. Your tea is poured by someone higher rank than you. A ritual, yes, but not meaningless. Lady Sada is across from you. Her eyes drift lazily across the hall before locking on your left hand. She doesn't speak, but the smile she gives you is thin as rice paper and twice as sharp. Lady Maru sits beside you, her fan closed tightly in one hand. You've noticed she only closes her fan when she's plotting. She leans slightly as if adjusting her sleeve. "Nice ring," she murmurs. You glance sideways. "I was told to wear it." "Of course you were." A pause. "But did you choose how to wear it?" You don't answer. After breakfast, you're instructed to attend a lesson in court poetry, something you've done a dozen times. But today it's not the usual instructor. Instead, the session is led by a visiting poet from the northern provinces, a man known for composing riddles inside of verses. He smiles too much. He bows too long, and when he assigns you a verse to complete aloud, it is this: the bird that sings with no name. Everyone watches. You speak the next line slowly, does so only to be caught. The silence that follows is pointed. Someone stifles a laugh. You don't look to see who. The instructor nods. "Elegant," he says, "and tragic." It's a compliment that cuts both ways. You return to your chamber before midday, finding a folded note waiting on your mat. This one is not shaped, not sealed, just plain parchment with a single line. "Wear the ring tighter, you're starting to slip." No name, but it's Chikako's handwriting. You'd know it anywhere. You don't respond. You don't need to. But you do tighten the ring on your finger, pushing it down past the knuckle until it presses slightly into the skin, just enough to remind you. Later, the matron arrives. She looks tired, but she always does these days. "There's been a shift," she says without preamble. "Lady Hisako has returned." You blink. That name hasn't been spoken in months. "Returned from where?" "From pause," the matron replies. That word again. That palace euphemism. Pause, which means removal without explanation. A cleansing of memory. A neutral exile. When someone is too powerful to be punished, but too dangerous to remain. She will be attending the garden ceremonies this evening. You understand the message, and you will be expected to stand near her. The garden ceremonies are simple on the surface, offerings placed into floating bowls and set into the stream, poems recited and aloud, a seasonal celebration meant to appear light and graceful. But beneath it always are the glances, the handoffs, the conversations crafted to say what mouths cannot. It's diplomacy in petals and firelight. That evening you dress carefully. They give you a robe of navy silk embroidered with white pines, a pattern symbolizing endurance and winter. The sash is gold. Your attendant fastens your hair into a layered style you haven't worn since your earliest days. Demure, soft, a subtle reminder of your origins. You are walked to the garden in silence. The sky is pinking at the edges, clouds low and heavy. Rain threatens, but hasn't yet arrived. You take your place near the lanterns, the river flowing lazily beside you. And then she enters. Lady Hisako. You've never seen her before, not in motion, not in flesh, only in whispers, only in the gaps between records. She is tall, older than you, with skin pale as ash and hair dressed in a coiled style that hasn't been seen since the last empress reigned. She walks without fear, eyes sliding across the gathering like she's looking for something long overdue. When she sees you, she stops, just for a second, then she smiles. It's not kindness, it's curiosity, like she's looking at a puzzle that almost fits. She takes her place one cushion down from yours. You bow. She returns it. A servant approaches with the bowls of offerings, flowers, coins, bits of rice, tiny scraps of poetry rolled into spirals. You place yours into the water, a single peony petal and a scroll that reads, "The stone forgets the rain, but not the crack." You don't watch it float away, but Lady Hisako does. "Interesting," she says aloud. The lord arrives soon after, walking the edge of the stream with the first wife at his side. His eyes scan the women. He says nothing, but when he sees you, his gaze lingers, just a moment too long. Lady Atsuko doesn't react. That's her strength. You return to your chamber late, your sleeves damp from the mist that finally broke into light rain. The ring feels heavier now, the band biting into your skin. You remove it slowly, holding it up to the candlelight. It gleams like bone, like a warning. You set it in its bokshumen beside a folded scrap of silk and a fan painted with sparrows. And as you lie down, the whispers crawl beneath your door. Names you've never heard, dates that don't match, stories of women who didn't fall, but were pushed. The ring didn't make you safe, but made you worth removing. And now you know just how many hands might reach for your throat when the lights go out. There's a strange quiet that follows being recognised. Not the kind that settles peacefully, but the kind that feels staged. Like everyone around you has stepped just slightly out of sync, waiting to see what direction the next whisper will blow. In the wake of the garden ceremony, your days don't change on the surface. You still wake before sunrise, you still drink the same tea, you still walk the same corridors lined with the same eyes, pretending not to watch you. But now the walls lean in a little closer. Lady Hisako's reappearance has warped the palace's rhythm. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, it's with the effortless authority of someone who never really left. She glides through the women's quarters with her sleeves trailing like shadows, offering nods that somehow feel heavier than words. When she passes you, she says nothing. But the way her fan flutters once, open then closed, tells you all you need to know. She sees you, not just as a rival, as a possibility, which is worse. By midday, word has spread that she's been assigned a personal chamber near the centre of the compound, a space previously reserved only for high consorts or visiting nobility. It's a calculated move. The palace doesn't just reward those who return, it makes sure they return visibly. The matron confirms the unspoken truth that afternoon. You're no longer on the general roster, you've been moved to rotation. That's the official term for favoured consorts who no longer serve in routine tasks but are summoned for specific needs. Private readings, seasonal poetry, political distractions. You've graduated from concubine in training to something with less definition and far more consequence. Chikako doesn't congratulate you. She visits late. Her presence a quiet punctuation on the end of an already too long day. There's no going back now, she says, sitting beside your low table, pouring tea without asking. I didn't think there ever was, you reply. She drinks, then studies you with the calm detachment of someone watching a fire they didn't start, but expect to reach their doorstep eventually. Do you know what Hisako did? She asks. You shake your head. She told the Lord a truth no one else would, Chikako says. She told him his decisions were turning the palace to rot. You blink. And he didn't exile her? He made her disappear without calling it punishment, she says. She was too valuable to discard, but too dangerous to keep close. And now she's back. Chikako nods, which means the rot has returned. You don't say anything. You know what she's really saying. Be careful, or be next. That night you're summoned again, but not to the usual garden pavilion. This time it's the moon room. You've never been inside it. Most haven't. It's spoken of like a dream, a place reserved for private councils, secret lovers, and decisions that never reach the surface. The room is round, windowless, lit only by the flickering reflection of a shallow water basin in the centre, its surface fed by a hidden spring. Lanterns line the perimeter, each one painted with a different phase of the moon. He sits beside the basin, alone, barefoot, his robe a plain grey with no crest. He doesn't speak until you kneel. I had a dream, he says. You don't respond. The moon room is not a place for interruption. In the dream, the palace burned, quietly from the inside out. No one screamed, no one ran. They just stood there, watching the paper walls curl. You wait. I thought it was a vision, a warning, but now I think it was a memory. He reaches into his sleeve and pulls out a folded slip of paper. He slides it across the floor to you. You unfold it. A name, a list, 5 women, 1 crossed out. All concubines, your name is last. He watches you read it. These are not summons, he says. They're considerations. Your heart doesn't beat faster, it just beats quieter. Considerations for what, you ask, voice barely audible. He looks at the basin, the ones who will stand when the court collapses. You feel the air shift. This isn't about pleasure anymore. This is about succession, about legacy, about the invisible hand behind the fan. But I'm not a wife, you say. He smiles faintly. No, which is why you're not bound by ceremony. You fold the paper again, slowly. Is that what you want from me, you ask? Freedom? He tilts his head. I want clarity. You've seen this place for what it is, and you're still here. So is Hisako, you reply. And so is the mould in the foundation, he says. That doesn't mean it belongs. You almost laugh. Almost. He rises. You'll be called tomorrow. Not by me, but by the council. They'll want to know if your presence helps or harms. And if I harm? Then you'll be told to become someone else. He leaves. You remain by the basin, staring into the black water that reflects nothing but the flickering flame overhead. Back in your room, Chikako is waiting. You were seen going into the moon room, she says. You nod. They'll try to shift you into a box now, something they can measure. And if I don't fit? She gives you a look that is not quite pity. Then they'll fold you until you do. You sleep, but only barely, and when you dream, it's of paper screens curling in firelight, and your name, half burnt, still visible on the edge of someone's ledger. You wake with one word in your mouth, replaceable, and decide you never want to taste it again. The council chamber is not what you expect. You imagine a vaulted hall of authority, columns, tapestries, a space carved out for more power and performance. Instead, it's intimate. Uncomfortably, though, a single room with 3 low chairs on one side, 1 cushion on the other, and a scroll rack along the back wall like a line of silent judges. The only extravagance is a bronze brazier in the corner, its embers faintly perfumed, the smell of pine and ash. A warning, maybe. You're escorted in just after the hour of the snake, neither too early to appear eager nor too late to seem defiant. The men seated across from you don't rise, they barely glance up. Their robes are muted, each embroidered with subtle family crests you're meant to recognize but aren't supposed to acknowledge aloud. You kneel on the single cushion and fold your hands in your lap, head bowed, but not too low. A long silence. Then one of them clears his throat. You've been given favour, he says. You nod once. You've been seen in spaces usually reserved for wives. Another nod. You've also caused conversation. You raise your eyes slowly. The one in the centre meets your gaze, older, stern, with a thin grey moustache and a tired mouth. He's not curious. He's already judged. He's just confirming how the weight should fall. You walk the line, he says. I didn't draw it, you reply, before thinking better of it. The second man's brow twitches, not anger, amusement. The first continues. Your placement is under review. Not a question, not a threat, just a line drawn in silk. You say nothing. They like that. The third man finally speaks, younger, with ink stains on his sleeves, likely the one who writes everything the others say. Why do you think you're here? He asks. You look at him. Because I've learned to stay quiet until the right person needs me to speak. That lands, not praise, but pause. Lady Hisako spoke too soon, says the centre man, and now she's back. But in a different shape, he replies. You feel the shape they're trying to press around you. It's smaller than you are, but sharp-edged. Something that cuts if you wriggle too much. They ask a few more questions, none of which are really questions. Where did you grow up? Who trained you? Do you understand the responsibilities of shared power? Have you had dreams of ambition? Have you ever spoken out of turn? You answer each with the tone of someone who's done her homework and left it slightly unfinished on purpose. Then the final statement. You will attend the Spring Court gathering in 3 days' time. You will represent not a title, but an option. Not a person. An option. You bow, you're dismissed. You walk out feeling like your skin's been ironed flat and red. The matron meets you halfway down the corridor. She looks at you like a pot that didn't crack in the kiln, but might split under heat. Well, she asks. I passed. For now. She doesn't follow you back. She knows you need time and space and silence, which you don't get. Lady Maru is waiting when you return to your chamber. She doesn't bow, she doesn't sit. She just paces once, then stops and stares at you. Do you know what happens to women who become options in this place, she asks. They get chosen. No, she says. They get weighed, then compared, then divided into what parts are useful and what parts are forgettable. You say nothing. I was an option, she says, for 2 seasons. You knew this. It's whispered about in the baths, in the scroll rooms, how close she came, how quickly the attention turned. I wore that ring you're hiding in your sleeve now. Your face doesn't move. I still have the indent, she adds. You finally look at her. Then why warn me? She smiles, but it doesn't touch her eyes. Because if you're going to take the spot that was meant for me, I want to make sure you at least earn it. Then she leaves. She doesn't close the door behind her. That night, you find a note tucked under your bedding, folded small, handwriting you don't recognise. The last girl they weighed against a wife is still burning on someone's ledger. No name, no sender. You burn the note. The next morning you wake before the bells, before the birds, so you rise and dress yourself, no attendants, no matron hovering at the door. The robe you choose is plain, but the sash is tight. You spend the morning walking the halls you've memorised and the ones you're not supposed to know. Past the room where the fan was left open. Past the bench where Hisako sat in exile with her silence. Past the empty room where Kiyomi once combed her hair. You find the servant corridor, the one behind the kitchens, and the boy who bowed too deeply weeks ago sees you, says nothing, and hands you a folded paper without looking up. Inside, a seating chart. The spring court ceremony. You scan it. You are not listed by name, but your cushion is beside hers. Lady Atsuko. Not behind, not across. Beside, a gesture of harmony, a placement of peril. You understand what they want. A piece that looks like grace, even if it tastes like blood. You fold the chart and slide it into your sleeve beside the ring. And for the first time in weeks, you allow yourself a thought that feels like defiance. Maybe the shape of me was never meant to fit. Maybe I am not silk. Maybe I am smoke. 3 days is nothing. It slips through your fingers like sand. And no matter how tightly you try to grip it, there's always less than you thought. You spend those days the way a woman does before being painted into a portrait she never asked for. You study the faces of those around you because their glances have changed again, sharper, quicker to retreat. No one smiles at you now, not even out of habit. They nod, or bow, or vanish entirely. You are becoming dangerous to know. The night before Spring Court, your chamber is stripped of every fabric with visible pattern. You're left with silent simplicity and the robe they lay out across your bedding. Pale silver with a threadbare pine stitched along the hem. It's not meant to impress. It's meant to disarm. Not a robe of power, but of absence. The idea is to float through the room like you don't carry sharp edges, even though everyone in attendance knows you do. When the hour arrives, the bells ring once. Just once. Not the usual triple chime reserved for wives. You're not a wife. You're not even officially a permanent concubine. You're a variable, a hinge, something no one can quite name but everyone understands must be watched. Spring Court is held in the Jade Garden Pavilion, a high canopied chamber with open walls and polished stone floors that reflect everything back at you. Faces, flames, lies. Rows of cushions stretch across the room in precise arrangement, each embroidered with the sigil of its occupant's family or favour. Yours, of course, has no sigil, just clean white silk, unaffiliated, dangerous in its neutrality. The wives are already seated. Lady Atsuko is placed at the heart of the room, dressed in crimson layered over white, her hair sculpted into a towering knot adorned with silver combs that shimmer like frost. When you enter, she does not look at you, but everyone else does. Lady Hisako is 3 cushions down, her robe is black, embroidered with subtle cranes that appear and disappear depending on how the light strikes. Her eyes find yours immediately, and this time she does smile, not cruelly, but like someone watching a puzzle move into place. The Lord arrives last, not alone, never alone. A retinue trails behind him, scribes, chamberlains, a pair of minor generals dressed in travel-worn brocade. He walks slowly, deliberately. When he passes your cushion, his gaze flickers just once, down to the empty white silk. He doesn't stop, he doesn't nod, but the tiniest muscle in his jaw tightens. That's enough. The ceremony begins with poetry as always. Lines written by the Empress before her death, read aloud each spring by the senior wife, and then by the favoured women chosen to echo her words. Lady Atsuko recites her stanza with the grace of someone who's lived with this performance for half her life. When it's your turn, you rise, kneel, and speak in a voice calm enough to unsettle. Your verse. The petal falls because it must, but the root stays buried, listening. A beat of silence follows. No gasps, no murmurs, but the way 3 fans flutter open in quick succession tells you what matters. They heard you. Lady Maru glances sideways, her fan clenched so tight her knuckles show white. Lady Sada lowers her eyes, not in shame but in calculation. And then, just as you retake your seat, the first wife speaks. Not to you, to the room. We must make space for the season's new growth, Lady Atsuko says calmly, even when it rises where we didn't plant. The room does not move. No one dares react. But it's not nothing. It's a tether, a signal. The first wife has acknowledged you openly and in metaphor, which in this place is the same as placing a knife beside your plate with a note that says don't let it slip. Later, after the poems are done and the offerings are placed into the garden stream, you are approached by a quiet official in ceremonial blue. He leans down and whispers just one line. You are to follow. You obey. You're led not to the Lord's chamber, but to the Shadow Hall, the private antechamber used only for palace transitions. No one speaks here. No food is served. No music plays. This is where titles change, where some women are told to pack, and others are told they are no longer guests. He's already waiting. He's not seated. He stands at the edge of the carved screen, looking out at the garden beyond. I didn't know if you would wear the ring, he says. You don't answer. It's good that you did, he continues, not because of what it means, but because of who will fear it. You step closer, but not too close. He finally turns to you. They think I'm offering you a place beside me. He pauses. I'm offering you a position in something much older. You tilt your head. I'm building a palace within the palace, he says, one that doesn't rot, one that doesn't forget. You feel the shift in your stomach. Not excitement, something heavier, legacy, the kind of weight that reshapes spines. I've seen how they look at you, he says. Some want you silenced, some want you married off to disappear, and some want you turned into something easy to praise. And you ask? I want you unafraid, he replies. It sounds like a kindness, but it's not. It's a demand. He steps forward, close enough now that you can smell the sharp cedar on his collar. You'll be given a title at the next moon, he says. It won't be public, not yet, but it will protect you if you don't waste it. You nod. There will be tests, he adds, some of them quiet, some of them brutal. You say nothing. Then he steps past you and disappears into the dark corridor behind the screen. No farewell, no promise, just direction. You return to your chamber with that echo ringing in your chest. He is building something, you are becoming something, but the floor beneath your feet, still paper thin. You undress slowly, slide the ring off, place it into a lacquer box now crowded with whispers, scraps of silk, folded notes, the first hairpin you wore, the list of names from the moon room. You close it, not to hide it, but to give it room to breathe, because tomorrow you'll open it again, and decide who you'll be next. There's a new pattern to the days now, a stillness that hums just beneath the surface, like the low throb of a drum before the first strike. The court isn't speaking about you, at least not where ears can hear, but the air around you feels swollen, like everyone is bracing for your next breath. You've stopped trying to decipher their glances. You know the looks by now, envy with a veil of politeness, suspicion dressed up as tradition, curiosity sharpened into mockery. But none of them matter as much as the empty space Lady Atsuko allows to exist beside her each morning. Not always near, not always visible, but open. It's not approval, it's allowance, and that is something no woman in the palace gives lightly. This morning, when your attendant helps you dress, she pauses longer than usual over your sash. She keeps adjusting it, not quite meeting your eyes. You finally ask what's wrong. They've been moving things, she murmurs. Whose things? She ties the sash tight. Kiyomi's again. That room, the one that's supposed to be cleansed, reassigned, stripped of memory. You say nothing as the attendant smooths the back of your robe, but your pulse hitches. Once is standard, twice is suspect. By midday the sky hangs low, bruised and grey. Rain whispers against the eaves but never quite commits. You're assigned to the scriptorium today. Not to copy, but to observe. The chief scribe says it like a favour, but you know it's surveillance. You've been put in a place where knowledge flows, hoping maybe it will soak into your skin without leaving your fingerprints on anything. The scroll he gives you to read is unmarked, bound with simple twine. Inside, palace expenditures from the last 3 years. But someone has underlined several entries. Unusual gift orders, unscheduled deliveries to quarters that haven't been occupied in months. One particular entry, A lacquered chest sent to the silent quarters. The name of the recipient is missing. You look up. The scribe avoids your eyes. You take your time, commit the patterns to memory. That's all you can do. After, when you return to your chamber, there's another item waiting, an envelope sealed in red wax, but no crest. You know immediately that it didn't come through official hands. The matron hasn't touched it. Your attendant claims it appeared while she was folding linens. You unfold it alone, seated at your low table. Inside is a single page. A name at the top, Lady Ao. You've never heard it before, but the list below it is unmistakable. A chain of duties, assignments, and final notations from 5 years ago. Position, concubine, status, rotational consideration. Final entry reassigned to garden archives. No exit recorded. Another ghost. Another story scrubbed halfway through. You reread the entry 3 times, your skin cooling with each pass. Then you scan the margin, where something faint, almost hidden, has been scratched in. Not handwriting. A drawing. The outline of a bird, a crane. It doesn't take much to recall your own first note, the one he sent you folded into a crane. You'd thought it was poetic, personal. Now it feels ritualistic, almost like a tag, a selection. You place the paper into your box of whispers and feel the weight of it shift everything inside. That night the moon is thin, silvered, barely there. You slip from your chamber after the bells, your robe belted but plain. You carry no fan, no ornaments, just silence. You walk the edge of the garden, past the lanterns extinguished early, past the hedge where Kiyomi used to sit with her tea, past the space where Lady Maru once whispered that being noticed was not a victory but a delay of sentence. You don't expect to find anything, but you do. Near the base of the weeping cherry tree, where the roots snake over the rocks, there's something nestled in the soil. You kneel, brushing it clean. It's a comb, ivory, cracked. You lift it gently, run your thumb across the carving. A crane. Again. You're not imagining the pattern. You're not the only one who was marked. And now maybe you're not the only one left. When you return, Chikako is waiting just outside your chamber, her arms crossed over her chest, a look on her face that hovers between exhaustion and warning. You weren't supposed to go out alone, she says. I didn't ask. She studies your expression. You've seen something. You nod. I've been seeing, you say. Then slowly, you open your hand and show her the comb. Her face doesn't change, but her voice does. I had one too, she says, years ago. You stare. She finally sits beside you. Mine wasn't carved, just painted, but it broke in the same place. What does it mean? You ask. She exhales slowly. It means we were never chosen for pleasure. We were chosen for memory. You frown. For what memory? She looks you dead in the eye. The palaces. You sit in silence for a long while. Long enough that the rain starts again, harder now, tapping the shutters like impatient fingers. The palace can't remember, you say eventually. No, she replies, but it can make sure you don't forget. That night you don't sleep. You kneel by the box of whispers and take everything out. The ring, the fan, the silk scrap, the note from the ledger, the name of the woman who never left the garden archive. Then you take the comb and place it on top. Not hidden, not folded, just there. Like a keystone in a structure you didn't realize you were building. You lie down with your back to the wall and your eyes on the ceiling. The wind moans through the rafters. You think of the other girls, Io, Kiyomi, the ones whose names no longer live in anyone's mouth. You wonder what the palace did to them. But more than that, you wonder what it kept them for. The box feels heavier in the morning. You haven't added anything new to it overnight. No new secrets folded into paper. No anonymous warnings pressed between sleeves. But still, the lacquered corners seem more solid, as if they've soaked up every word you didn't say while you lay awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind recite names you never got the chance to learn. You don't open it. Not this time. You leave it sealed, tucked against the far wall of your chamber like a shrine no one dares to touch. A collection of proof, of warnings, of threads too tangled to sever. Today they call you early. The sky is still dim with mist, the corridors shrouded in that pale blue hush that makes the palace feel like a world half remembered. You're told you're to assist with the ceremonial preparations for the chrysanthemum viewing, though that isn't for another week. You know what this means. It's not about the festival, It's about placing you in rooms again. Quiet rooms, strategic ones. You find yourself assigned to a tea preparation chamber normally reserved for the elder court ladies. Retired wives, former favourites, women who no longer play the game but still keep score. They sit around the low table like porcelain spectres, their smiles slight, their hands too still to be harmless. When you enter, they barely glance up. One of them, thin as a reed and wearing a robe the colour of dried plum skin, points to a set of tea bowls stacked neatly at her elbow. "Bring the second one," she says, "not the first." You do as you're told, they murmur as you work. Not quite to you, not quite away from you either. I heard she read the moon records. No one reads the moon records, not unless they've been chosen. She wasn't chosen, she was preserved like salt fish, or like something they expect to come in handy during a drought. You grind the matcha with slow precision, your hands moving on muscle memory. You don't let the tremor in your fingers show. You stir, pour, serve. Only when the tea is steaming in front of each woman do they finally fall quiet. One of them gestures to the seat beside her. You take it. She smiles. "Do you know how many women sat where you are?" You don't answer. She continues. 6. 4 of them vanished. 1 went mad. And the 6th. She died right here, mid-sentence. They say she tried to say her own name, but it had already been taken. You sip your tea. "Then I'll speak mine often," you say. She laughs, the sound like paper being torn gently. "Do, while you still can." They leave you after that, their robes sweeping over the mats like ghosts remembering how to glide. You're left in the room alone, the tea cooling beside you, the silence beginning to hum again. On the tray they've left behind, there's a single chrysanthemum petal, out of place being. Too early in the season. You touch it. It's real. A message. They know you're being watched. They know you've made it to the edge of something. They just aren't sure if you'll step forward or be pushed. You leave the petal behind. It's too obvious, too weighted. You've already collected enough tokens. By late afternoon, a new note arrives. This one is hand-delivered by the aide who never speaks. His eyes meet yours, but only briefly. Then he disappears. The seal on the letter is unmistakable. The crescent crest. His mark. You open it. The rain is coming. You may wish to take shelter, or learn to dance in it. No instructions, no summons, just a test. Of your instincts, of your nerves. You dress simply. You braid your hair for the first time in months. It makes you feel like a girl again, or like someone pretending to be one. You walk the outer gardens slowly, letting your feet guide you past the half-forgotten paths and the servant quarters where laughter still exists. Then deeper, past the koi pond, past the old plum trees, to the ridge where the outer wall curves and the ground begins to slope into untamed grasses. And there she is, Lady Hisako, standing beneath the gate that leads to the abandoned east wing. "You've been expected," she says. You say nothing. She turns and walks toward the crumbling corridor. You follow. The east wing hasn't been used in decades. It smells of mould and secrets, the floors warped from years of neglect. And yet, candles burn here now, low, flickering. You reach a chamber where cushions are arranged in a circle, but no one sits. She stops at the centre. "This is where we decide," she says. "We?" She nods. The ones they forget they taught how to listen. You stand across from her. Why now? Because you're the last one who still thinks she's part of their story. You don't flinch. She steps closer. You think they've chosen you, that this ring, this rotation, this favour, it means you're safe. But it only means you're visible. And the visible ones are the first to be cut when the palace needs to pretend it's whole. So what's the alternative, you ask, vanishing? No, she says, changing the story. She hands you something, not a weapon, not a letter, a record, a copy of one of the ledgers you saw weeks ago, but this one is different, marked in her own hand. Dates, names, connections. These are the trades made to keep the court balanced, she says. Children handed off, wives sent home, mistresses murdered by omission. You stare at the page. You recognize one of the names. Ayo. She was my sister, Hisako says. You meet her gaze, and she was more than a whisper, more than a mistake. You close the ledger gently, then finally you ask the question you've been holding since the moment you arrived in this place. Why me? She looks at you, and for once, there's no mask. Because you didn't try to survive, she says. You just did, and now you remember. She steps back. There will be a moment, soon, she says. You'll be asked to step forward, speak, claim.
And?
And you'll know what kind of woman you are when that moment comes. Then she vanishes into the dark hall beyond. You return to your chamber with the ledger wrapped tightly in your robe. You place it in the box. The lid no longer fits perfectly. You stare at the pile inside. It doesn't look like a collection anymore. It looks like an archive. And in this palace of performances and paper walls, maybe that's more dangerous than power.